Let's go through your stuff. Theft of wire or cable. Theft. Trespass. Evading arrest. Burglary of a motor vehicle. Theft. Assault of a family member. Attempted burglary of a motor vehicle. Burglary of a motor vehicle. Theft. Third. Burglary of a motor vehicle. Unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Evading arrest in a motor vehicle. Burglary of a motor vehicle. Assault. Possession of marijuana. Robbery. Felony theft. Assault, a prior, now a felony. Another felony assault. Unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Tampering with a government record. Felony theft. Unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. And now open, you have unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, felony theft, burglary of a motor vehicle, and possession of a criminal. What on earth do we need to do? I missed who's this?
Page 13, Kyle.
All right, good morning, Mr. Kyles. Sir, you're charged with deadly conduct. You're facing up to a year in jail and or a $4,000 fine. We are going to do probable cause. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can or will be used against you. You have the right to have an attorney present. If you cannot afford one will be appointed to you, sir.
On April 2nd, 2025, in Harris County, Texas, a law enforcement officer was dispatched from an apartment complex and spoke to complaining witness who said that she was laying in her bed and was awoken by her son, the defendant, screaming. And then she heard 2 gunshots go off in the apartment. The complaining witness then got out of bed and took the gun from the defendant, hid it, and called 911. Upon arrival, the law enforcement officer recovered the weapon, along with 2 fired shell casings and 2 fired slugs matching the caliber of the pistol fire. Upon contact with the defendant, the law enforcement officer noticed the odor of alcoholic beverage and that the defendant was wet while fully clothed. The defendant stated he had
Defendant was what?
wet while fully clothed.
Wet while fully clothed. Okay.
Sure. The defendant stated he had been drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana and that he fired the firearm in the apartment. The defendant stated he was wet because he dumped a bucket of water on himself. The defendant stated that he was paranoid at the time.
Mr. Kyles, I'm sending you for a drug test. I want to know what, if anything, was in your system. You're to come right back. I will appoint you a lawyer today, but you're not to use alcohol or illegal drugs. If I find that you're using, it's not going to go well for you. You're also not to be in possession of weapons. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
So do you guys have a rip done on this case? Do we
Yes,
know
sir.
whether she wants him back at home or no?
I made contact with the claimant witness owner, however, she did not wish to talk with me about the incident after.
She want to talk to you?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Don't be in possession of weapons, Mr. Kyles. You know, I don't want to have to put you in jail and make your bond high. I don't know if you have anyone in this life that is prepared to pony up $5,000 to $10,000. So when you're out there in the free world, if you don't have anyone that's gonna, pony up that money for a bond, you'll be stuck like Chuck in there. So be careful. All I want is my city safe.
Yes,
You
sir.
understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what we'll do is I'll appoint you a lawyer today. Or do you have the ability to hire a lawyer, or would you like a court-appointed lawyer?
You can appoint me a lawyer, and I may consider hiring one if the understanding is not
I
understood.
just want to know whether you want a court-appointed lawyer or not.
Yes,
I
sir.
can
Yes,
appoint
sir.
you a lawyer
Yes, sir.
today. I'm sending you for a drug test. I want to know what, if anything's in your system, come back, and then I'll have a lawyer waiting for you.
Okay.
Okay, please.
The financial affidavit.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Torres, you're charged with driving while intoxicated. Probable cause as I found in your case. Your case is 332 days old. I'm now going to put a monitor on your ankle so I know where you are at all times. You're not to consume alcohol or illegal drugs. If I find that you're using, I'm going to keep you. Do you understand? You've already taken off from me multiple times. The next time you take off from me, your bond is going to hit the clouds. Do you understand? Don't say anything. I want you to understand that it's been multiple times. Do you understand?
What do you mean by multiple times?
You have not come to this court multiple times when you were required to be here.
Right?
I'm not going to sit
Yes,
here and
I
argue with
understand.
you about it. It's just, that's the fact. So does he have anything open?
No, Your Honor, it does not.
Okay, I'm going to appoint you a lawyer today and we're going to figure out what happens with your case. Take a seat for me in the jury box, please. Good morning, Mr. Upshaw. Sir, you're charged with interference with the duties of a public servant. You're facing up to 6 months in jail and or a $2,000 fine. We're going to do probable cause. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can or will be used against you. You have the right to have an attorney present. If you cannot afford one, one will be appointed to you, sir.
On April 5th, 2025, a law enforcement officer conducted a traffic stop due to a heavily tinted motor vehicle in Harris County, Texas, and also for the defendant's failure to signal within 100 feet before making its turn. The officer told the defendant to lower his windows for safety. The defendant slightly lowered the rear window, and the officer was still unable to see inside the vehicle. The officer asked the defendant again to lower the window. The defendant said he did not have to. The officer observed the defendant acting nervously by breathing heavily and staring at the floorboard of the motor vehicle. The officer told the defendant to step out of the vehicle for safety. The defendant refused. The officer opened the driver's door and told the defendant to step out of the vehicle. The defendant declined again. The officer grabbed the defendant's wrist and attempted to pull the defendant out of the vehicle. The defendant resisted by clenching his fist and pulling his arm away towards his body. And the officer told the defendant to step out again, to which the defendant stated he did not have to. The officer attempted to pull the defendant out of the motor vehicle. The defendant continued to resist by pulling his arm towards his body. The officer was able to pull the defendant outside of the car. The defendant again resisted by clenching both fists and refused to place his hands behind his back by tensing his arms and pulling away. The officer and his partner forced handcuffs onto the defendant in order to perform the arrest.
Mr. Upshaw, I'm going to find that there's sufficient probable cause to go forward with your case. Can you run his license, please? See, guys, the only bond condition I'm placing on you now, sir, is that you're not allowed to drive unless you have a valid license, a Texas driver's license, and liability insurance in your name. I'm just asking you to follow the law. If you do not have one or the other, then you're not allowed to drive. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
His license is eligible.
Okay, so I'm going to have you sign conditions to that, and then do you have the ability to hire a lawyer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're going to give you time to hire a lawyer, so I'll have you go to Victoria, sign a reset. We'll have you take a seat in the jury box. I'm going to get you bond conditions. We'll have you sign it, and that's it. You're free to go. All right? Please. Yes, no. All right, Mr. Weaver, you're charged with theft. You're facing up to 6 months in jail and or a $2,000 fine. We're going to do probable cause. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can or will be used against you. You have the right to have an attorney present. If you cannot afford one, one will be appointed to you, sir.
On November 15th, 2024, in Harris County, Texas, an officer was dispatched to an Academy store. The officer made contact with the complaining witness, a store manager that observed the defendant remove a pair of shoes from a box, place shoes on his feet, and proceed past all points of sale without paying for the shoes. The shoes are valued at $129.99. The defendant was observed arriving and exiting the property in Ford Expedition and be associated with an individual who was identified as the defendant. The officer was able to positively identify the defendant as the defendant with his driver's license photo compared to the surveillance of the theft that occurred on November 15th.
What was the value again?
The value was $129.99.
All right, sir, I'm going to find that there's sufficient probable cause to go forward with your case. I'm ordering you now as a condition of your bond not to go back to any academy. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
If I find that you do, I will revoke your bond, put you in jail. No more PR bonds for you. How did Shreya already get this? This is Weaver, right?
I believe he was in another county.
Oh, that's why okay. So what we'll do now is I'm going to have you sign a reset, and then I'm going to have you take a seat in the jury box while I get your bond conditions. I'm going to try to find your lawyer too, so we can get you all on one page. And then after all that, we'll get you out of here, okay? Do not leave until we excuse you, though. Please. Can you file no going to any Walmart, please? Good morning, Mr. Teapot.
Buenos días, señor. ¿Qué pasa?
You're charged with illegal dumping. You're facing up to 6 months in jail and or a $2,000 fine.
Parece multa.
We are going to do probable cause. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can or will be used against you. You have the right to have an attorney present. If you cannot afford one, one will be appointed to
Se
you,
la
sir.
asignaría uno. Eso.
On August 1st, 2019, surveillance video recorded a gray Chevrolet Avalanche bearing a temporary
Dice,
license plate
Chevrolet Avalanche con las placas
and Also recorded two Hispanic males exited the vehicle and illegally dumped a refrigerator on the side of a city easement in Harris County, Texas. The weight of the waste was approximately 117 pounds. The officer used the license plate to identify the defendant. The officer compared the surveillance video to the defendant's driver's license photo and believes the suspect to be the same person.
Y sospechoso era la misma persona.
See the person?
Dice,
On the
¿vieron la
surveillance video, Your Honor.
persona?
There's surveillance of him actually dumping the fridge.
Yes, Your Honor.
Vigilancia dice la foto
All right,
de
Mr.
él.
Bucks, I'm going to find that there's sufficient probable cause to go forward with your case. You run his license, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, I
Su señoría.
just have one moment.
Sure. If you do not have a Texas driver license and liability insurance, you are not allowed to drive.
No puede
And
manejar.
that is a condition of your bond. If I find that you do in violation of this, I will put you in jail. I don't know what your immigration status is, but if you're not in this country with permission and you go to jail and immigration finds you because they sweep it daily, they will put a detainer on you and you will be stuck in there until this case is over with. And then you get shipped off to immigration. Do you understand?
¿Usted lo entiende? Yes, sir.
So to speak, one moment, Your Honor.
Tiene licencia de conducir.
It is eligible, Your Honor.
Sí, ese.
Okay. So we will create bond conditions to this effect. I'm going to have you sign a reset, Victoria. I'm sorry, do you have the ability to hire a lawyer?
¿Tiene capacidad de ocupar su propio abogado? No me preocupo. No, I don't.
I need to see if you qualify for an appointed lawyer. So what we can do is we can have you fill out an application. I need to know everything about you, whether you work, what kind of work,
Porque tú haces
you know,
trabajo.
your monthly income, money you have in the bank, what kind of car you drive, and then I'll take a look to see whether you qualify. Debbie will give you an application. I'll have you sign a reset. We'll have you take a seat in the jury box while we get your bond conditions. And then after that, I'll take a look at the application. Good morning, Mr. Williams. Sir, you're charged with theft. You're facing up to a year in jail and or a $4,000 fine. We're going to do probable cause. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can or will be used against you. You have the right to have an attorney present. If you cannot afford one will be appointed to you, sir.
Thank you, Judge. On July 15, 2024 in Harris County, Texas, a defendant was observed on surveillance video entering a pawn shop accompanied by a female, a toddler, and a baby in a car seat carrier. The defendant was observed putting down the baby, picking up a projector, and concealing it behind an item on the next aisle. The defendant then returned to the baby, picked up the baby, and then picked up the hidden projector and concealed it in the car seat. The female completed a transaction at the counter, and the defendant left with the item in the car seat without paying, passing all points of sale. The defendant was identified by his Tennessee driver's license photo by the complaining witness. The value of the item stolen was $2,000 or $2,099.99.
Do we know if they got it back?
I do not. Does not say in the DIMS. So we need just a moment, Your Honor, to.
We can worry about it later.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Williams, I'm going to find that there's sufficient probable cause to go forward with the case. I'm ordering you as a condition of your bond not to go back to this pawn shop. You've also missed 3 different times. If you miss excuses go in one ear, go out the other. Actions are what matter, Mr. Williams. You've missed court on 3 different occasions. If you miss again, I'm going to make your bond so high, it's going to hit the clouds. Do you understand? Do you have the ability to hire a lawyer? I'll have you fill out an application. I'll take a look to see whether you qualify. Okay. You get, every time you bond out, they give you paperwork telling you where you need to go, the date and time and the location. So I'm not going to argue with you, man. It's just, we've had 3 different occasions. Your case is 220 days old. So I'll have you fill out an application. I'm going to have you sign a reset. I'm going to have you take a seat, but I need to do further bond conditions on him. So you're not allowed to leave until we do further bond conditions. Please. Okay. Hey, Well, you're already here.
Well, I know, but once in a while, I like to like lean into tradition.
Top of the morning to you.
Top of the morning to you, Dad. I've got two. I'm gonna let Mr. Paris go first on the easier. one.
Yeah.
Good morning.
How are you?
Last name is Guevara. First name, Evelyn.
She was set last week, we rolled her to this week, the PRAS was scheduled yesterday.
No contact?
She went,
Oh, okay, great.
she went to the PRAS, they have the report.
Wonderful.
She's present in court today. She has to get her driver's license, reinstatement fee paid. And then, that'll be the next one.
Have you paid the DA fee and the,
They haven't sent us the contract yet until she gets her driver's license sorted.
I've never seen that. They usually send it and then we can, because that could take months to happen. Well, the case was already 225 days, so.
They won't send us a contract without one of two conditional precedents. She either has to have a valid license or sign a non-driving affidavit. And then for whatever reason, every time we do a non-driving affidavit, the DA's office then screws with us for 3 more settings about, please send us a non-driving affidavit. And then I have to get in a fight over the fact that
So
send-
we have a particular one here that they use. We can get it done today, file it. We can send it to them now. That way they can get you the contract so we can start moving this thing.
I'm fine with doing that. And then we can just amend it when she gets her.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Done. Do you have one, Shatori, in your mind? So Shatori's going to give you a copy of that. We'll execute that now. We'll set you like 2 weeks. Hopefully she can have everything done by then. And then they do the
Yes, Jeff.
supervision order.
Excellent. Oh, can you grab Mr. Broussard? Oh, Eric, grab him now, because Jeff's wanted to talk to him. I have Mr. Broussard, who's the fellow who we spoke about yesterday. He's here, he's in the hallway with his brother, I think. I was trying to remember if it's brother or dad, I think it's brother. So, per our conversation yesterday, your game was putting it back on, and I apologize, I don't have him on my docket, so I gotta look up the cause number.
It's already started.
And then, of course, it doesn't pull up, because I think I misspelled Broussard.
So where do we go from here?
So, they were debating, the district attorney's office was
Back
debating.
them at all?
Yeah, so it's the same answer basically that, this is when we're talking about like mental health.
They have a
Yes.
TRAS, right?
And I think, yes, we were gonna have a TRAS, or was it
I'm going to copy
a
that.
copy valve? That was it, because the TRAS were, any kind of thing that we do in the TRAS.
We're gonna do comp developers. So can we get a date today?
So what'll happen is, once I get him on bond, then I can file a comp eval and ask for a date. Because they won't give me a date if he's got a warrant. So,
Okay.
so we get him on bond. Yeah. Yes, Judge. It is 2503529. I give you Mr. Broussard.
Show up. That's all we're asking you to do. When you show up to court, good things happen, Mr. Broussard, okay? We need to do something with you now. I'm gonna reinstate your bond. We need to send you to do an evaluation. It's the only thing I'm asking you to do. If you do this, good things are gonna happen, all right? So I'm reinstating it now.
Yes, Judge.
File the paperwork. Is it?
I'm gonna do it right now. Yes, normally I can get, so I don't know when the date will be, but they'll tell me a date today.
Wonderful. Let's do it. So before he leaves, he knows the actual date.
Excellent.
Awesome. Okay.
And Judge, is it possible for him to stay in the hallway with his brother? Okay.
Don't leave.
Don't leave the floor.
Don't leave.
Be in the hall, okay?
Okay.
Just wanted to, before I bring Mr. Walter Moses out, I wanted to see, he's willing to do the plea today, but I wanted to see if you want to proceed with the plea, or did you want Mr. Garrett to get back with you on the information that you requested him to do, with regards to if he has any doctors or anything that treat for treatment and stuff.
Victoria, what were we gonna do with Mr. Moses again?
I can take out the felonies, reinstated one of the officers.
Thank
And if you've got a problem, and also working with one of them, we the.
Because
Y'all have a environmental.
She's here, yes.
Her email's not
Upstairs,
working.
Your Honor.
What's her name?
Do they even have an offer?
There's not. 2 years tease.
I guess we'll just, let's just do the plea, you know?
Yes, sir.
Because I mean, who knows what's gonna happen there, how long it's gonna take.
Yes, sir. We're pleading on we're not pleading on the new law violation, we pleading on the test.
Yeah, that's okay.
Of course. Yes.
He's got sufficient back time. I mean, I don't even know what it is. Mr. D, have you written it up yet? Have you written up the plea yet?
It's already in the DA's report. From that.
I sent you.
Ms. Reedy?
Yes.
Good morning, Judge.
Okay. No problem at all.
Can you hear me?
Do you mind hitting the button on the sound bar? I think they always turn it off for some reason. I don't know why. Just one time there's a button. Okay, say something.
Something.
There we go. All right.
Good morning, Judge. I'm here on Katrina Keys. You had her on docket for Friday for a bond violation, but she needed to come in and talk to you anyway, so she came today.
Do you have a cause number,
Yes.
please? So it's not on docket today, so I need a cause number.
254-8155.
I'm at 254.
8155.
Ms. Keys, come up.
This one needs to know.
Oh, I see. That's right. Okay.
And this is for you to write any off docket stuff. It's today.
I know. This was the other day I did this.
This is today?
No, it's not today. It was the other day. I don't remember. We'll have to look.
Okay.
I'm sending you for a drug and alcohol test right now, man. But unacceptable. You're on bond for DWI and you now you're allegedly consuming alcohol.
No.
Yeah.
I spoke with the Scram people and she said that was not it. It's not an alcohol violation. She doesn't know if
Alcohol was detected during both tamper events. But they cannot be confirmed because of the nature of the tamper.
I haven't had a drink since I was arrested, Your Honor. I've done everything this court has asked me to, outside of looking for a job and everything. I have had no problems. I've called Scram about my device, because I have neuropathy swelling once it goes down. So she said it was loose. I asked them, the only thing that I did on Saturday and Sunday, which can be confirmed by my GPS monitor, I went to my son's basketball game. I left my house, went to my son's basketball game, from the game back.
Let's
I
do
have
this.
not done anything.
Lisa, do you mind sending me for a test right now, please? I'm going to send you for a test. You
Okay.
come back. Do you
No problem.
understand?
Mhm.
We'll deal with the violation when you come back.
Okay.
Just please take a seat.
Is he on the different?
Good morning.
I have an off docket matter.
Shoot.
Kathy Leonard, bond violation.
Yep.
He just sent it yesterday. He is, I believe he's in the Star of Hope. And we had a conversation about it. I told him it's fine as long as you can take a scram. I was unaware that he had to do the manual upload. I had no idea.
So what happens is you have to periodically go to have the information downloaded because that's how they see. And they tell you that as soon as you get the device.
This is for who?
Leonard, it's on for Friday.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we instruct them, John 49, if it needs to come in,
Right.
deadline of when it needs to come in.
So Mr. Tyson, let's do this. Have him go Friday to have it downloaded and let's see. You know, or have him go Thursday and then we'll have him come to court Friday.
The problem is, they will not confirm or deny that he's there. He always responds to me. He calls me all the time. And that's why I believe he's in there, because they take their phones and they don't allow him any outside contact. I mean, and I called this morning to confirm or to see if he was there. They, of course, wouldn't confirm or deny. They said if he's there, he'll be the one to give me a call back.
I guess let's wait to see he calls you back, you know?
Okay.
He knows that he's supposed to get in contact with you. He knows the day
Right.
that he's supposed to have it downloaded and, you know, it's not our first rodeo with the DVR.
Yeah, that's the worst thing about it.
Right.
So on Friday, I will not be here. Will I be able to appear via? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All
absolutely.
right. So at this point, I don't even know if he can, like, he doesn't obviously know to be here on Friday, but I'm waiting on him to call back and.
Let's see. Just let me know.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Morning, Judge. I have Josue Bueno on today's docket. His appearance is required today. He texted me this morning saying he's having some transportation issues. Can we do like do you want to do like a 1 week reset for bond forfeiture or just do another appearance required?
See how old he is.
Yes, Judge. The offer's time served.
Okay. So I'll SFBF
1 week.
whatever day you want next week. If
Okay.
he's not here, and let him know.
Okay, yes, Judge. And then I have,
Tired today. I'm still here.
right, no, I understand, Judge.
The Uber to get here, man.
And then I also have Jorge Gomez, Judge. And this is one where we're going to do a probation on that one. And is there any way he can be transferred to a sober court or?
Oh, this is the one in custody.
Yes, Judge. T-Raz recommended thinking for a change, but he has a problem with alcohol, so seeing if there's any sort of sober court option. Oh, sorry. It's Jorge Gomez.
This is the one we were talking about late yesterday, remember? Oh,
Yeah, I missed you. I think you had left just when I got here, Judge, because I was stuck in felony
so,
court.
he wants to do sober court, but he's in custody.
They did the TRS for him. It looks like his cases were out of county. So they recommended a community residential program, but they are staffing the case with over court. I just don't have a response yet.
Okay.
So it's community residential is what
So
they're
it's
saying.
inpatient, Judge? So it'd be like about 6 months inpatient?
I don't know.
Community residential is one goal. You and him would have to kind of find together and then kind of go based off.
Oh, okay.
Like it depends on how well he does.
Oh, I see.
It's not
Okay.
as low as 3 months. If he responds really well.
He needs to find the place?
A community-based one is.
But what about,
He doesn't live here. Doesn't live in Harris County. We're supervising his case,
that's right.
but it's a out of town case.
So even if he doesn't live here, can we still do the program here? And then when he's done, he goes and does aftercare there? Or perhaps aftercare here and we allow it through Zoom?
What do you need for it? It's not a county case.
He lives at a county.
Oh, okay, well.
Yes.
But I don't think that that should bar him from going into something now, you know, just because would be here stuck residential regardless.
Right.
You know, it doesn't make
So
sense.
He takes into consideration his felony probation that's out of Big Sur County. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, he's on felony probation.
Out of Bear County.
You know what court in Bear County? What court? What's the number? I'm curious.
What'd you say, Judge?
I'm curious what court in Bear
Oh,
County.
I see. Well, let me talk to
Can you
him.
pull up his NCIC?
Yes, sure.
This is on Bueno. I'm curious to see what judge he has in Bear County.
You might know the judge or, I see.
Because last time she gave me this praise.
I'm not seeing a conviction with the probation here, Your Honor.
Really?
Started it back in 2017.
2017. Holy moly.
The
Must be.
aggravated robbery.
I'm sorry, that's a.
And he's still on that probation? Okay.
I don't think that we can do this. I don't think we can. If he's on probation in another county for an ag rob,
Let me talk
we
to him.
can't put him into a probation. I mean, not, I don't know. I mean, we could, but I mean, Is there a warrant for his, I've got to imagine there's a warrant for his arrest out of Bear County now because of this. And because he's been on the lam for. Was the probation transferred here, Shatoria?
It was transferred here, but I think they're gonna transfer it back to the newspaper.
Right.
I just haven't moved it information.
Okay. Your Honor, I apologize. I'm not seeing an aggravated robbery on what I have out of Bear County. There was a forgery that was dismissed in Bear County, but that's the only Bear County charge that I have. Unless,
I see this at the bottom.
that's interstate.
And here's the thing, we can't do this today anyways. You now know that he's on a probation for an aggravated robbery.
We talked to
Who
him.
pleads to this today that could seriously hose him over there, or he's looking at 20 years in prison.
Well, yeah, let me talk to him, Judge, because
3G,
because he may have an update as far as how that probation's going, or let me talk to him about that.
regardless though,
Yes, Judge.
is to be advised and know that if he pleads to this today, it could
Impact his probation there. So let me talk to him, Judge. Thank you.
Lori.
Good morning,
Hi,
Judge.
good morning.
Approaching on Christopher Melendez. It's old.
Is he in jail?
He is charged with murder and he charged with DWI and UCW. The issue is that the UCW, it maybe is the murder weapon. And we can't plead and we're ready to set for trial. They put an offer on there.
So he evades, allegedly gets into an accident, someone dies?
No, he allegedly kills his mom, then drives off. Gets seen, not maintaining a single line and takes off, evades, and then has a DWI and the gun in the car.
Can you tell me the
They just
name?
charged
Christopher
him with
Melendez.
they just charged him with the murder like 5-6 days ago, huh?
No, they charged him with the murder. I think the DWI came in and then the next day the murder came back.
So this one, yes, the murder came in right after the DWI. I'm sorry, I was back here. I mean, a district court chief put an offer on the misdemeanors.
We're not taking,
Say?
we're not taking it. He's ready. If you want us to set it for trial.
I mean,
He's set for
that case, that could take 2 years.
He's set for pretrial conference in June. It's like his fourth. So.
Right.
And then,
What have they offered? Have they offered him 4 years?
Mhm.
and the, from what I understand, like the UCW is the alleged murder weapon. So we're kind of.
So let's do this. Do you mind bringing him out, please? Melendez?
Christopher Melendez.
So what day is the pretrial conference set for?
June. Check it right out.
So far away.
June 16th.
Are you ready to go if we send it? Do you have?
I really need to get with Toinette because I think that there's facts in the case that could affect the murder case.
I'm not gonna hold it over.
No, I'm not asking you to, Judge. I get it. I totally get
Already
it.
370.
I think there's an easy option here that I just need to speak with Toinette, like really get to sit down with Toinette and talk about.
Discovery complete.
Complete.
Let's set it. And I'll just advise them, hey, right, the RDWI and the UCW is the same day as the evading. So it's,
And then the murder came in right after.
right. Well, it's the same, alleged same day, right?
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Melendez. Good morning. Your cases are old and it's time to make a decision on what to do. They've offered you plea bargains in these cases here, but it's your decision whether you guys want to take it or not. If not, the cases are old that we need to go ahead and set them for trial. So I'm going to let you talk with Lori to see what you guys want to do. If not, we'll set your case for trial today in, I guess, 30 days, 45 days, set it.
I would ask for a 45
He
days.
wants to talk. We
Okay,
talked about it.
I'd ask for a 45 day.
done. Okay, all right, man. Yeah, just you pick it, Lori.
All right, you said you want 45? Okay.
Thank you.
Pretty good. I have Jose Serna on docket today. Or Juan Serna, I'm sorry. Juan
Oh,
Jose
Juan.
Serna.
Great. You need to speak to him.
Yes.
So if you can bear with me, let me just thin the line out and then I'm gonna have him brought out so we can
Okay.
talk.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Morning, Judge.
Hi.
I have Daryl Myers on docket.
Okay,
He was set to be, to plea and sentencing. He was set for plea and sentencing today. It was moved to next week. I think his attorney on his felony case, sorry, he was set for sentencing in felony court today.
you have to literally reset the.
I know.
Over and over and over. and-
I know, but I do have a confirmation. It sounds like he is getting a probation up there. So we're looking at a double probation, I'm guessing.
It's time that we need to do something.
Is there any condition, before we do the paperwork, any conditions that you would, any reason you would reject the plea if we do an 18-month probation?
No, no.
Standard conditions? Okay, all right.
No,
we'll
I
get
mean,
it
the
done.
only thing on a time served on a second DWI, but anything else, I'm game, whatever you guys.
And he can pick the 3 days as a condition?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Judge.
Good morning, Judge. I'm approaching on Darren Cassidy. He's in custody.
Okay,
This fourth one, I guess he stepped out. So we were here on this one on Monday. And you wanted us to reach out to, Brad to see about the mental health PTI.
So you're right, it's kind of what I assumed. So the mental health PTI, it's literally, I think there was a case we were talking about after Mauricia had approached yesterday where it's basically like, yeah, you're agreeing to go to the Harris Center, but there's no real follow-up. It's just an agreement to go to the Harris. Right. That's why with the mental health PTIs, I'm just skeptical of them offering them, because I don't really think they're gonna get part of the issue. I've talked to Mauricia about a couple options for this case.
mental health case though.
Well, but that wouldn't be mental health PTI. That would require a plea to defer, at which point then you would have a mental health case.
Well, my client wants the time served judge.
Okay, but I'm gonna warn him that if he picks up another one, I'm not doing this again.
Understood. Thank you.
Or I'm sorry. Okay, I'll hit you up next. Omar, tell me, you're already here.
Yes.
Oh, you have a plea?
She has a plea.
Okay, come on. Sorry, Omar.
It's good.
It's on Mr. Gonzalez Dominguez.
See, that's here.
No, he's on watch.
Gonzalez Dominguez. Mr. Gonzalez Dominguez, you're charged with driving while intoxicated. Second offense. Looks like you have worked out an agreement where
Client for a plea?
it is a true second though, right?
It is a true second, Your Honor. I believe it was just filed as first for whatever reason.
I don't. You're charged with driving while intoxicated, first offense, although it's a second offense. You need to understand that there are very serious consequences with this, Mr. Gonzalez. You now will have 2 DWIs on your record. What happens on the next one?
Próxima. ¿Qué es lo que va a pasar? Deportación. Deportation? No.
If you ever
Sí, usted.
get pulled over again and an officer smells alcohol, you will be charged with driving while intoxicated, third offense, which is a felony offense. You were looking at a minimum of 2 years in prison, a maximum of 10 years in prison.
10 años.
Do you understand? If I were you, I would never get into a car, even if you've had a sip of alcohol. Otherwise, it's probably not going to go well for you. Do you understand?
¿Usted lo entiende? Yes, sir.
You are giving up a lot of rights by entering into this agreement today. You are giving up the right to a trial, right to compel witnesses to testify on your behalf, confront and cross-examine your accusers. If you are not a citizen, there are possible immigration consequences. You can be deported, excluded from the country, denied naturalization. Under federal law, you give up the right to appeal. Once you accept this agreement, you are stuck with this forever. Is it true or untrue that you had a .15 or above?
Que tenía esa concentración de alcohol más de 0.1%. ¿Verdad o no verdad?
The agreement is 1 year in jail to be probated for 15 months. You will do a DWI, repeat offender DWI education class. You will do one victim impact panel. You will do a TRAS to see what other conditions you may need. If they assess other conditions, you must fulfill them. No drugs, no alcohol, no breath test refusal. If you were pulled over in a car, an officer asks you to submit a breath test, you must do it while you're on this probation. If you do not, then you're in violation. I'm telling you now, Mr. Gonzalez Dominguez, I'm going to do everything in my power to protect my county at all costs. And apparently you have not gotten the message. So now you will be required to pay the DPS supervisory fee and the court costs. You will now be leaving here somewhere in the neighborhood of around $5,000 in fines and fees. And if you don't pay it, every $100 you owe, you will sit 1 day in jail. And if you're not a citizen of this country, you're not here with permission, you go to jail for that kind of time, you will probably get an immigration detainer. Do you understand?
¿Usted lo entiende? Yes, sir.
I'm suspending your ability to drive for 1 year. You must also obtain does he have a portable device now, or what does he have?
I'm on right now, Your Honor.
Okay.
We are asking for the portable since he will be in.
So once he gets the portable device first, then we can take off the scram device.
Yeah.
I have been paying for all of your devices as of now. Going forth, you will be required to pay for everything. If you fail to pay for it, if the device goes into lockout, so will your probation. You must do a $100 donation to Mothers Against Drunk Driving. 30 hours of community service. Do you have children?
¿Tiene hijos?
No.
No.
Okay. You will be required to do the 30 hours of community service.
Varios.
Is this how you understand the agreement?
Yes.
How do you plead to the offense of driving while intoxicated? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
I'm going to find you guilty and I'm going to follow this agreement. How much is the total?
Judge, you said you were gonna do a 1 year flat driverless suspension?
Correct.
So with the driverless suspension was 4,900.
No, but it's 45 for the
45.
supervisory, and then what are court costs?
Oh, so the DPS fine is
4,500.
And then the court costs are 420.
How much?
420.
420?
420.
You will now owe $3,920. You will be given a 2-year payment plan to do it. If you fail to pay, like I said, 1 day for every $100 you owe. Somehow we have to get your attention, and I hope this is it, before something drastic happens where you end up with a 50-year sentence. Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. May we be excused?
Judge, I'm approaching on something off docket real quick. 254-3286 and 3287.
Brandon?
Yes, Your Honor. I was here early last week because I approached to talk to you about the driving situation with him. You said that if we could confirm employment, that you would consider allowing him to drive for employment purposes. I have confirmed employment. He is here today. He is received.
Did you get the cause number?
Yes, Your Honor.
What happened with the case and why I know it's a reckless driving. Is he
There's also a unlawful carry of a weapon, Your Honor.
What happened with the cases though?
I'm sorry?
What happened with the case, the reckless driving?
Reckless driving. Law enforcement officer observed the defendant's motor vehicle traveling at excess speeds of 120 miles an hour, aggressively maneuvering and making unsafe lane changes through medium heavy traffic without using a turn signal. Law enforcement officer paced speeds at up to 110 miles an hour before catching up to the defendant. And the law enforcement officer observed the defendant throw marijuana out of the driver's side window before coming to a stop in an attempt to get rid of the driver's before contact.
What does he do for a living?
Well, he just got a job offer, Judge, for a job at Whataburger. He'd be working the night shift at Whataburger.
I'm not letting him out in the middle of the night to drive. No.
He doesn't drive to work, Judge. And he would actually be at work throughout the night. He would actually be at work, so he wouldn't be driving. He doesn't drive for Whataburger. He would just drive to Whataburger, work all night, get off in the morning, come home.
Okay, show me proof that he's got the job.
Got it right here, Judge, and I can send it to your pretrial services. I had emailed Victoria about this yesterday, and I told her that I would send it.
Does he have a monitor now?
This was a curfew, Judge, from 9 to 6 a.m.
Okay, so we'll do a change. So he actually has the job?
He has the job, Judge, so they're just waiting for him.
So we need to have the GPS monitor know that he's at all times at that Whataburger, right? And that's the only way. He can only drive for employment purposes. I don't want him out during the day.
Understood, Your Honor.
Like doing other things. The only reason is to work to and from. And
Yes, Your Honor. And
come up,
so
Mr. Brandon.
So still observe the 96 curfew when not working?
okay, just answer your sides. You're good right there.
The only reason, the only authority I'm giving you to drive is to and from work, and that's it. I will have a GPS monitor on your ankle, so anytime you deviate, it's going to ding, and I will know, and I will revoke your bond if you do it. Do you understand? I don't want you out driving and lollygagging at all times. No, the only reason is for work, and that's it. If I find you deviating from this, you're going to stay with me. Do you understand?
Do you understand? And Your Honor, the shift is from 10 PM to 7 AM, so that entire time he would be at
So we'll
Whataburger.
give him, however, maybe half an hour from the time before he goes from work and then half an hour afterwards to go back. Okay, all right.
Well, Judge.
Okay, thanks, Val. Mike Moss.
Your Honor, it's a reason I deserve. Huh?
That's not true.
Yeah, not as good as I want, but better than I deserve. Your Honor, I had a case on your docket. It's Jaime Hernandez.
Okay.
And this is a case where it's an FSGI. The chief said that he would do a time served on this, but I have to, in all candor,
Yes.
Substitution?
there was
There was, and that's the thing.
3,000.
We were trying to nail it down.
I think we had already talked about this. If you can't pay it now, he's supposed to pay it today, right? Because it's
Well, if he had it,
200.
yeah, but he doesn't have it. He's
Do it through probation, I guess, right?
well, we could, or maybe if he doesn't have the money, what would you accept in terms of
Nothing. No,
no
not
deal?
fair. No. How's it fair to let him skirt 3,000?
Well, the deal is this, I'm trying to remember how old the car is and how much damage my guy may have done to it. I think if we look it up, if it was a new car, that may be one thing. If it's a 1982.
That's something that should have been done quite a while ago.
Well,
It's not-
and we,
Yes.
I understand. And
Just, Mike, what's fair is fair. And if someone creates damage to a car,
yeah, I agree. If he created it.
saying that he did,
Well, my limited experience in practicing law has been that sometimes people, when they incur restitution bills, they may incur.
I know that they inflate. Are you saying that they're inflating it?
I believe that it's true, but I could be wrong.
I don't know. What kind of car is it? If it's a
It's a
used one, we're
2001
gonna have an
Chevy,
issue.
2001 Chevy Silverado. It's worth $3,500.
Well, let's see. Hold on. I'll pull up the blue book. But then it would also, how much damage was done to it?
So What we
same?
had is the rest. I'm looking, I'm pulling it up now, Judge. Let's see.
So it's a 2001.
2001 Chevy Silverado.
I wonder what the blue book is.
3,500. Don't blame stress, it's four-wheel drive.
$3,300 was the restitution amount.
I'm sorry.
There was a front quarter panel damage. Let me do this, Judge. Let me go in right back to the desk over here, parse out what is actually the front quarter damage to the vehicle. Obviously, there's internal, like, I don't know what was caused by that.
Right.
I think the officers had said the front quarter panel was what was damaged with a broken tail light. Let me go parse it out.
Yeah, that's not $3,300.
So here's what we could do to pay it. Let me go parse out, me and Mr. Monks can come to an agreement. We can do a deferred, but the only condition is that he pays restitution. Does that work for everybody?
I think I'll talk to my guy, but I think that's fair.
Okay.
Okay.
So you guys determine the value and then whatever it is, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, Mike.
Sorry.
Other than that.
I'm trying to figure that out.
Good morning, Judge.
Hi.
Good morning.
Hey, what's new?
Same old, same old. Mr. Rodriguez, it might be under Comendador,
Under what?
Comendador, or Rodriguez.
Bond, right?
Sorry, Judge.
Bond?
In custody.
It's gonna be Rodriguez and, okay, Rafael.
Yes, Judge.
Okay.
We just got an offer on this case yesterday, but I've been going through the body camera really slow. It's in Spanish. I know. So,
You need money?
yeah, so I'm getting an order together to present that to you.
However much you want.
Yes, Judge. Okay. I'm likely to set it for trial though, because the CW has recanted. And so it probably.
Is this a DVD case? Okay, so you guys now, I mean, knowing that that's where it's headed, if the video's in Spanish, you guys need like 45 to 90 days to be able to. So if you can get,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
There's a felony pending on the that may.
Well, are you?
Well, so the issue is so our case is allegedly with the wife and the felony case is with the daughter. Mom has recanted for both. And she stated that, and daughter was one of the 911 calls for this case. And so I don't see if she's not complying in this one. I don't see the felony case actually moving forward. So I don't want to rely on the felony case because you might be in the same boat.
Whatever you want. I mean, if you want to set it, let's set it.
Can we
We're
get-
gonna wait for
Yeah.
felony.
Yeah.
We do what we do. So, but be that as it may, please do I guess, whatever you guys do to be able to translate the video in Spanish, knowing that that's where it's headed. So, because it takes at least 45 or something, or 90, I don't remember what it was. And then, so just file your motion and I'll sign it, whatever you want.
Thank you, Judge. Can I get a reset for like 2 weeks and then come back and then set it for trial for that?
You can have more.
Okay, can I get one more reset? I think he's 100.
Whatever, doesn't matter.
Thank you, Judge. My excuse. Thank you.
Hi.
Good morning, Judge. I approached last week on Enrique Ramirez. We have an offer from the state for time served on this case. And the client has a VAWA case pending. He already talked to his immigration attorney. You gave us until this week for him to accept or not accept the plea. So I just wanted to run it by the court and make sure it's
Okay.
okay to go.
I'm not done with the time served, but, because it's a second, but anything else, I'm game. You tell me what you want. And are you ready now, today?
Well, the offer was time served and you did mention it last time I approached. Did you say what better offer is there than a time served?
Oh, no, I'm not on the second DW. Sorry.
That's what he consulted with his immigration attorney for.
A conviction is a conviction, whether it's this, whether it's that, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
she
if you
said
want
as
till
long as
Monday,
his
you can
sentence
go
is
till
not
Monday.
more than 180 days. Obviously no jail time because he'll get a nice hold. So
I'm not down with the time served on the second. I mean, they usually offer a reduction to a first, have you offered that now here?
it was, Enrique. Well, I've talked to the chief about other alternatives, but again, the what he did talk to the immigration attorney was specifically the time serve offer.
I can give you till Monday, so you can go talk to them about the alternate offer and then come back on Monday and let me know. Whatever you,
Can I come back? Because I can't come back Monday or Tuesday. Is there any way I can come back Wednesday?
sure.
I have a trial here, so I'll be in the building. Sounds good. Thank you, Judge.
So you want to set up for a plea for that day then?
I'll set it for plea and then he'll talk to his attorney again and see what the chief's willing to offer. All right, thank you.
Got a psych eval for Broussard, sir.
Okay, great.
And then when I was resetting it, coordinator asked me about bond condition, which I didn't occur to me that we hadn't addressed.
I think we already have, Felicia, just don't pick up any new cases.
Broussard.
Broussard. I have to give you the cause number. It's not on docket. Tell me when you're ready.
I'll get out of the way.
All right, 254,
No, 250
250,
3529.
3529.
Yeah, I'm putting a monitor on it, you know?
I understand, Judge. I told him that would be a possibility.
So GPS,
So 2503529.
yes, ma'am.
Broussard.
It's telling me the version.
2503 529. Yeah, Broussard.
Hey, Judge, did you address the BBR on this one? When there is?
Oh, no, I didn't know he had a BVR.
It was loud this morning.
Ramirez, come up.
For the conditions, Judge?
For my guy.
GPS. Para allá.
Judge, do you want me a line here?
Yeah, let me, no, he's on bond.
Oh, yes.
He's here now. So just show up to court. No new cases. Oh, and
I mean, if
the
you want
comp
to-
eval.
Huh?
The comp eval. Show up for the comp eval.
That's fine, Judge.
Who's it with the mental health version center?
No, just conference evaluation.
Okay, does he need to submit that to the court?
It gets done automatically.
Okay.
Do you want a ankle monitor? Because there's no exclusion zones. It's just.
Yeah, so we know where he is.
Okay.
That's why. Because I don't want him to take off again.
Well, I mean, he was in a hospital. I don't know if they cut those off if you go into the hospital or not. I mean, I
So
don't.
is he taking medication now?
No.
What happened?
The problem is he is one of those ones that has slipped through the cracks of healthcare. So now that he's on bond, I can get a social worker through the MAC, have him appointed and have them try to help. But basically, he's going to a hospital, he gets admitted, he gets a script, he gets out, script runs out, and he doesn't have any long-term treatment. The American healthcare system is failing, Judge. That's a great depiction of it. But hopefully with a social worker from the MAC, they can,
Hopefully you can.
yeah, hook him up to somebody.
All right.
But, so ankle monitor, come to court, no new crimes, do copy eval. Excellent. Thank you, Judge.
Thanks, Nick. Hey,
All right.
you are Juan Jose Serna.
Oh.
Mr. Serna, you now stand charged yet again with burglary of a motor vehicle. We are going to do probable cause. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can or will be used against you. Please.
There's very so one moment, my system is. Adjourned. On March 20th, 2025, law enforcement officer was dispatched to a burglary of a motor vehicle that occurred in Old Navy parking lot in Harris County, Texas. A law enforcement officer spoke to two witnesses who viewed the incident. The first witness stated that the suspect's motor vehicle pulled up the complaining witness's motor vehicle, and the suspect wearing a camouflage hoodie got out and pulled on a door handle of the complaining witness's motor vehicle, attempting to open it. That set off the alarm of the motor vehicle, and the first witness advised that the suspect got back into a car, drove off to another area of a parking lot, parked and waited for the alarm to stop alerting. The first witness stated that once the alarm stopped making noise, the suspect jumped back over to the complaining witness motor vehicle, parked, and the suspect in the passenger seat got out and was able to make entry into the complaining witness's motor vehicle. The complaining witness advised that she was walking up to a motor vehicle when she saw a Hispanic male wearing a camouflage jacket sitting in the driver's seat of her motor vehicle. The complaining witness stated that the suspect saw her walking up, jumped out of her motor vehicle, got into the passenger side of a waiting vehicle with an unreadable plate, and the complaining witness then heard the male tell the driver, "Go, go, go." Another law enforcement officer advised he was patrolling when the gold Tahoe that the suspect was observed in passed him at a high rate of speed. Traffic stop was initiated, and the law enforcement officer was able to send pictures from the witness showing the suspect motor vehicle leaving the location to another law enforcement officer who was able to verify the suspect motor vehicle. After further investigation and search of the suspect, a camo jacket was found in the rear seat, and a flat-pointed screwdriver consistent with the tool that would be used to break a lock on the complaining witness's door.
It was both that were attempting to B&B.
Yes, Your Honor. Yeah. The defendant is the registered owner of the vehicle, but the motor vehicle was displaying a counterfeit tag that did not come back registered to.
So Mr. Serna is the one that owns the Tahoe?
No, I apologize, Your Honor. Mr.
The other
Serna is the second. Looks like the second individual that was in the passenger, that was in the driver's seat whenever the complaining witness came out of the vehicle, is not the owner of the vehicle.
Judge, if I may, the complainant or the witness stated that she saw a Hispanic male with a camouflage hoodie. When they were pulled over, there's two people in the vehicle. The camouflage hoodie was not on my client, so I'm saying that there's no probable
They
cause.
have both of them in the car, being car.
The both of them in the car.
That's
Okay,
what,
good.
according to you, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Both individuals.
Were in the car attempting to,
I have the
Because I thought it read that one person wearing a camouflage hoodie was in the car. when
that was the
somebody-
second one. So the first person goes in, gets out, and then that's when the other one goes in. And then at that point, the complaining witness comes up and tells them to take off. Mr. Serna, let's go through your stuff. Theft of wire or cable. Theft, trespass, evading arrest, burglary of a motor vehicle, theft, assault of a family member, attempted burglary of a motor vehicle, theft, third, burglary of a motor vehicle, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, evading arrest in a motor vehicle, burglary of a motor vehicle, assault, possession of marijuana, robbery, felony theft, assault, a prior, now a felony, another felony assault, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, tampering with a government record, felony theft, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and now open, you have unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, felony theft, burglary of a motor vehicle, and possession of a criminal. What on earth do we need to do to keep our county safe? It's a rhetorical question, but I don't know what on earth we need to do to ensure that our county and our cars are safe. You live in Houston, dude. You don't live in Montana or Wyoming. People like their guns and they like their cars. And when you muck with the wrong person, they're going to shoot your ass dead. It happens time after time.
Judge, he's due in felony court tomorrow for his felonies. His bond is currently set at 10,000 for this misdemeanor. Can we reset till Friday to see what happens in felony? I'm asking the court to not revoke his bond. His bond is set at 10,000. I'm asking the court to just keep it in place.
So there's nothing for me to revoke because he has not made bond on
In
the
felony, correct.
You're now being held at no bond on at least 2 of the felony cases that I see. If I don't know if you're going to get out, but if you do, I'm ordering you to have home confinement I don't want you out at all because you scare me, Mr. Serna. You really do. You're not going to be in possession of weapons. On your other ankle, I'm going to put a gram monitor so I know that you're not consuming alcohol. I don't want you using any dope. And let me be frank. If I find that you break any of these conditions on your bond, I'm going to make your bond so high you'll have teeth popping out. Do you understand? Do we have, who got the co-defendants? Do we have the co-defendants? No contact with the co-defendant, please, Felicia.
Still loading, Your Honor, I apologize. We have the co-defendant, Your Honor.
Say it again?
We have the co-defendant. I said on 14.
Let me ask you this. You ever had a job before? Like a full-time job?
Yeah.
That's probably a good idea. When you have too much time on your hands, you become self-destructive. So with this, it's just a matter of time, dude. It's either dead or 50 years, man. Really? Life's too short to live in a 6x9 box for the next 50 years. All right. We'll set you for Monday.
Okay, thank you, Judge.
Mr. Serna.
Should I have another person on docket?
Okay, sorry. Tell
We
me.
have Dwayne Berard. It's the chief. I'm sorry.
Bond or Jen?
Jail.
Okay.
Okay.
What's the word?
I was speaking with the chief. I'm not sure if he wanted to come up here on this individual. This is for Dwayne Berard, if we can do probable cause.
Sure, of course. It's an assault, right?
Yes, Your Honor. On February 1st, 2025, an officer was notified of an inmate who was assaulted by two other unidentified inmates. The officer was informed by the detention officer that the complaint was stated he had been assaulted by the defendants. The officer was unable to review surveillance video due to the camera being down. The officer interviewed the detention officer who identified the defendants by the description given to him by the complaining witness. The officer interviewed the complaining witness and observed redness and bruises to the right side of his face and a laceration on his right forearm. The complaining witness said that two light-skinned black males had entered into a cell yelling.
Joe Torres?
I apologize, I'm reading straight from the note, Governor. You gotta get your gay ass out of here. And started stomping and punching him. The complainant was described one male as bald with a beard and the other had a fade with waves and tattoos. Witness stated both males had seen him previously sitting with a transgender inmate and made comments. Through the description, the detention officer was able to identify the defendants.
Judge, the complainant says that the people that assaulted him were two light-skinned males, one bald with a beard and one with a fade and a beard. My client at the time had an afro. He does not even match the description given by the complainant. So off of the wrong, improper identification of my client, there would be no probable cause to make the arrest. He doesn't even fit the description.
Ace? I mean, I don't know. You know, that was 2 months ago. Hair grows. I don't.
When I saw him, I got the case, I think February 11th. When I saw him on that date, he had an afro. In his booking photo, he has an afro. Now, after the fact, he has now cut his hair. February 1st is the date of the incident. He had an afro.
So what we have here is, and just come from the office report. By the description given by inmate Gardner, Cameron was able to identify inmate Williams, inmate Gerard, Dwayne. Inmate Gardner was in fear for his life and press charges against said inmates.
I don't know. Do you want to reach out to the officer? Did they like take some kind of?
I mean, absolutely.
Or
There was
did they bring
pictures,
him?
on the portal, the pictures taken, there is a male with a beard and a fade with tattoos as described by the complainant. However, the picture that's on the DA portal, that's not my client.
So, Your Honor, here's what I've just asked. We reached out to Colin because he does have some serious pending charges. I think we're going to be able to get our case resolved out based on our evaluation of this case. I just need a second here to get felony to reach back out to me to come to a resolution on this.
I mean, if they have the wrong person, they have the wrong
It's
person.
the wrong person,
I
Judge.
would argue that based on the PC we have in the DIMS.
You want to reach out to them now to see? I'll give
We've
you
already
some.
reached out. We've reached out.
Fine.
And we were here in our last setting for that to happen. It still hasn't.
Ariel, that's not what happened. What happened is Ariel came to me and said, hey, I think y'all have issues with the case. Here's why. I said, okay, we'll take a look. We have taken a look. We've given felony our concerns for the case. That is what was supposed to happen.
But is it true that the photo that they gave was a different person?
Yes, that is correct, Judge.
Where does
Let's do this. I got a line building up. Show them real
I have
quick.
showed them, Judge. And I gave,
Judge, based
I broke down the case, gave them point, details of what's wrong.
And I'm not, what I'm saying is, Judge, based on what Ariel gave me last time, we evaluated the case.
But we all have the discovery on the portal. I did my diligence. That's where I'm going to leave it,
Okay,
Judge.
let's do this. Let me stand down for a second. Can you pull the picture so I can see it real quick as well? And then let me take a look. And if it's not the right person, I'm going to find a PC now.
Okay.
So just, but they've been waiting. Let me, just give me
Okay, Judge.
10 minutes. And then let me.
I'll hop back in line and I'll have the picture ready. Thank you.
Ms. Souls.
Yes, Judge.
Hey.
Okay, so I have talked to pretrial in regards to the violations as to tampering with the scram.
You need a translator anyways, right?
I guess
Vicky
so.
Ramirez?
Yes. So, pretrial doesn't know exactly what was tampered with. He does work in construction. He wears boots, he wears socks. He does suffer from this condition called neuropathy, where he has to put like this cream on here. He says that scram actually has been causing him a lot of pain on his leg. So sometimes he shifts it to put the lotion or moves it. But since it was in the morning, he said it was probably like when he was at work with the boots. But there was no like DAC, no alcohol, nothing. It was just
Because a
tampering.
lot of times the way they do it, they tamper with it so that alcohol can't be detected. They'll put something in between the leg and the monitor to, evade. This is Enrique Ramirez.
This was,
A lot of times they'll say the tamper was from midnight to like 6 a.m. so that we know that there was something in between the leg or they've done something for that length of time. I don't know.
See the first one.
And it says alcohol was detected.
On March 1st at 4:32 a.m., returned to baseline at 2:40 p.m. That tamper was 10 hours and 8 minutes.
Come up, Mr. Ramirez.
I don't see the second one. I see the one on the first.
Tengo que te estás, que tienes alcohol en tu sistema y que estás fallando con la máquina también. No, sir. La máquina me dice otra cosa. I don't know what to tell you, Ms. Solis, but
oh, I mean, pretrial doesn't have knowledge as far as like what was the tampering. I mean,
they can't. It's impossible.
I know that, Judge.
All we know is that the device was not detecting his skin for a certain period of time, and at the same time, alcohol is detected.
¿Dónde estás el día primero y el día 8?
So let's do this. I need to get a translate here so I can properly translate and let him know what I'm going to. Oh, Plaza.
Yes.
Can I borrow you for a second, please? No, I just need you to help me translate.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Ramirez. You were instructed not to tamper or remove the device. We have two tamper events here, where on March 1st at 6:33 a.m. and the second one on March 10th of 2025 at 11 a.m. Alcohol was detected on the first event. Alcohol was not detected during the second tamper event. That's what I have. We need to do something with this case. It's 207 days old and he's now tampering with the device. So
I know, Judge. I mean, we're ready for plea today, but.
up the bottom. You're tampering with the device and you're consuming alcohol. Told you not to. Let's do this. I'll send it for a drug and alcohol test right now and he'll.
Okay, Judge, yeah, because he has no status. If he goes in custody, he will get a nice hold.
I have admonished you ad nauseum not to violate conditions, because if you go to jail, there will be serious consequences. And we now have tamper events and a positive alcohol rating. I am now going to send you for an alcohol and drug test right now. I want to know what, if anything, that you will test positive and you're to come right back. And we'll see.
Yeah, because he does say, he does use the creams on his arms and hands, so it doesn't have a BAC level or anything in regards to the scram, so.
Advised of.
I understand, Judge, I understand.
All I know is that alcohol is detected and he's tampering with the device.
Okay, all right, Judge. All right, well, so I'll step out and then, okay, thank you.
Judge, Gomez, he has been in touch with.
I will say, Judge, before we do the plea, I was informed by probation, he did a TRAS in anticipation of his sentencing for next week in felony courts. And apparently they are recommending inpatient treatment. So he's likely going to get that on the felony probation.
Over there.
That was their TRAS.
Yeah, we're not going to ding him.
Okay. Just wanna.
No, he'll be expected to once he's released.
Of course.
Mr. Myers, come up. Good morning, sir. Good morning. You're charged, You're charged with driving while intoxicated, second offense. You're facing up to a year in jail and or a $4,000 fine. You're making a very serious decision today, Mr. Myers. You need to understand that you ever get into a car forever and a day, you get pulled over and there's anything funky in your car, whether it's alcohol, dope, you're now going to be looking at a felony charge. Do you understand? A third DWI, you're looking at 2 to 10 in the penitentiary. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Have you been to the pen before?
Yes, sir.
You could be looking at potentially 15 to life days. You know, if it's a serious enough charge. You know, if you've been to the pen twice, you're habitual. 25 to life, man. Really. When something that's so easy as you taking an Uber, $40, anywhere you want to go. Even if you've had a sip of alcohol, a toke off a joint, you get into a car, you're begging for trouble. Do you understand?
Sure.
The agreement is 1 year in Harris County Jail to be probated for 18 months. You will do a repeat offender education class, 4 victim impact panels. You must also do a TRAS, which is an evaluation to see what other conditions you may need. He's already done a TRAS upstairs.
He'll still have to do it.
Can we go on that as well and we'll piggyback so he doesn't have to do it again? Okay, we're going to use your TRAS upstairs down here so you don't have to do it all over again. And what we'll do is we will do the same thing because they're requiring you to do SATIF upstairs, okay? Which is probably what they're going to order you to do. We will run everything at the same time so it runs together. Just if you have a problem, address it, man.
Sure.
The last thing you want, did you see what happened yesterday? Did you see what happened upstairs yesterday?
Sure.
Yesterday, there was a guy that's in his 30s that had 2 DWI convictions. He's out in a car. He rams into someone else in the back, kills an officer. Yesterday, he got life. So that's what I'm saying. It's an accident. You don't mean to do it, but if you kill someone, you're looking at a life sentence, man. Take an Uber. It's not hard. It's so easy. One button on your damn phone will get you a car wherever you want to go. He must do 3 days in Harris County Jail as a condition of the probation. Do you know when he wants to do it?
April 28th.
Okay. All right. No breath test refusal. If you're driving in a car, an officer asks you to submit a breath test, you must do it while you're on this probation. No drugs, no alcohol, and a guardian and a lock. Is this how you understand the agreement, Mr. Myers?
Yes, sir.
You're giving up the right to a trial, right to compel witnesses to testify on behalf, confront and cross-examine your accusers. If you're not a citizen, there are possible immigration consequences. You can be deported, excluded from the country, denied naturalization. You give up the right to appeal. So once you accept this agreement, you're stuck with us until you complete it or you get revoked. If you do something to violate this probation, I will issue a warrant for your arrest. I'm going to put you in jail. I'm going to bring you back out and we're going to have a hearing to determine if you violate it, and you're looking at an entire year. You understand?
I'm sorry.
Okay. I have to suspend your license. I'm going to suspend it for a year. Good luck to you, sir.
And the super fines and everything are waived. I am appointed. He is very much a good gentleman.
I normally on a second won't, but he's on probation. He's going to be doing SATF. I will. Don't get into a car, man. Just please don't get into a car. It's not hard. You understand? I'm suspending your license as of today. You're not allowed to drive. I will have you sign an affidavit today promising you're not going to drive. Mr. Myers, I don't care what you got to do. Just don't drive. All right, good luck.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Stop right there, because what this judge just did is worth every second of your attention. A man pleaded guilty to his second DWI this morning, and before he accepted the agreement, the judge leaned in and said, "Did you hear what happened yesterday? There was a man in his 30s, 2 prior DWI convictions, got into a car, rear-ended someone, killed a police officer. Yesterday, he has got life." And then the judge did something that does not happen often in a second. DWI plea. He waived the fines, he waived the fees, he waived the court costs. He said it is never about the money. He suspended his license for a year. He made him sign an affidavit promising not to drive. He said, "I do not care what you have to do. I do not care where you have to go. One button on your phone, $40, anywhere in this city. Just do not get in that car." The man has been to the penitentiary before. The judge told him, if you pick up another DWI with a prior pen trip on your record, they can enhance you. 15 to life for getting behind a wheel. So here is the question, and I want you to sit with this one all the way through. The judge waived every dollar this defendant owed. He used the TR from the felony court upstairs so the man would not have to repeat the evaluation. He personally made sure the programs run together so nothing is wasted. He spent more time on this one plea than most courts spend on 5. And then he said, "I don't care what you have to do, just don't drive." That is a judge doing everything the law allows him to do, and then going past it into something that looks a lot more like begging than sentencing. So here is the real question. When a courthouse does everything right, waives the money, coordinates the programs, tells you about the man who died yesterday, and a person still gets behind the wheel anyway, at what point does the system stop asking what more it can do and start asking whether anything it does is ever going to be enough? The judge said, "Good luck to you, sir." He meant it. He always means it. The question is what happens the next time this man's keys are in his hand and no one is watching.
Yes.
Actually, I don't.
Jeff, this one was good night. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. You ready?
Travius Bell, Your Honor.
Okay.
Mr. Bell, he's, was on the docket for today, but he does have a bond violation.
You mind bringing him up?
The Travius Bell.
You mind bringing him up?
Oh, yes, Mr. Bell. Oh. The state is going to join me, on this one, Chief.
Okay. Who wants to talk first?
If I may, Your Honor. I think the facts were that, you may recall, he was being evicted from a place where he was living with his family member. He was getting a drink. His family member has dreads like him, kicked the door. He was walking back to the residence. They accused him of doing what his cousin did. He was taken into custody because he had the MAJ out of Fort Bend County. I believe he gave a fake name or something like that. The state is verifying these facts. He was in the process of finding some place to live when he was here for his bond conditions. He's got his ankle monitor. He has a new place where he lives, where he's been resting his head. But I think the bond violation is popping up because he's not checking in to where the original location was that he gave probation. I believe he has phone records from when he was speaking with probation, trying to inform him of the updated address. And I just got the BVR last night at like 9 o'clock or something like that. The first time.
I haven't even seen it.
Yeah,
I don't even.
nor has the state. So perhaps we're
Let me take a look. So the bond violation is that you entered at 10:50 as opposed to the 10 o'clock, right?
Yes, 10:50 and 21 seconds on 3/28. And that goes back to 3/28 as well, Your Honor. And today is April 9th.
Don't pick up any more bond violations. It's not going to go well for you. You understand? If you don't have anyone up to pony, if you don't have anyone that's ready to pony up $10,000 on you, if you get both your cases revoked, you'll be stuck like Chuck in there until this thing's over with. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Make good decisions. One more. That's it. There's no excuse. Do you understand? Okay. All right. We'll continue supervision.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor.
We were contemplating on bringing him out here to do the plea. And
Not a
my
good-
client,
not a good sense.
he spat on the officer, picky. I was right there. I'm a witness to it. So, but the officer said that I won't have to remove myself because he said he's not going to file charges on it. But he did.
I mean, I don't know why we don't have a spit mask on him, you know?
Yeah, he had one on.
He took it off.
He took it off, Jerry.
And they refused to put it on. Just the court's information too, he was previously charged, that's one pending against harassment.
Right. But that's why he's got the felony upstairs. Nice.
Yes, sir.
So what do you want to do? Do you want to set it off?
We'll set it off, Judge, and we'll see, but I just feel bad for the officer. That was the most disgusting thing I ever seen in my life, you know, so. I like to commend him though, he was very professional, and he went away and thought about it and came back and did his job, so hats off to
Tell him, good job, but
Good job, yeah.
he's eternally going to be here because it's just,
Yes, sir.
you know, it's just, you had him evaluated?
Yes, sir, he came back competent. Yes, sir.
I mean, we're at this.
Are you able to communicate with?
I asked him this morning, I told him that we were about to do the plea. Are you ready to undergo this process today? Because the last time we were not able to do that, and he said yes. I asked him, I say, the judge is gonna ask you, how do you plead to the fact that you violated your probation by and true or not true? He said, true. I said, that's what you have to say, true. Are you pleading true because it is true? Yes. said yes, so.
Able to hold the
He was,
conversation.
I was able to hold that conversation about the process he was about to undergo, with, admitting to the technical violation. I told him that, that the state is moving forward on the technical violation because I could not, and, with all due respect, I could not, plead him to the new law violation because it's still a pending case and that could be used against him if he had decided to go to trial on the case, his admission to it. But yeah, he spat in that officer's face.
Okay, I guess just we'll set it off. I don't know what to do. Tori, should we? Do we T-RAS him, right? What did it say?
A judge, I would recommend if he doesn't work the case out, we just set up for a form of MRP hearing.
What did they T-RAS recommend? The problem is that just because of what upstairs, we can't do anything anyway. So even if they say residential or you know, we can't.
I mean,
Can you talk with
he's got a
us?
technical that he could.
No,
It's just,
if I were to sentence him to anything
right.
because of the open felony, it's
I mean, he's completely not out on this case. I mean, that's the other.
It was outreach and mental health initiative with IFB and speaking for a change. That's what the T-RAS said about. I'm gonna assume they didn't consider him for DDRP just because of his behavior in custody.
should we do another one?
I don't think they'll take him in DDRP because of the.
The bad he is?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll
And
put it very
you know, the
into
thing is that
programs.
even if we sentence him to that, I don't think he'll.
Yeah, he's not gonna.
And correct me if I'm wrong, there's no state payments there.
Not in misdemeanor.
What? Which one you say? I mean, we could, but he'd have to be.
And then I don't think I don't prefer misdemeanor. Well, now it's felony.
If felony does it, then he could, there's more options there, but a misdemeanor, it's just DDRP and SAT.
But you all don't need this case to proceed with the felony,
Right,
do
we
you,
don't.
chief?
For the misdemeanor,
You know,
I get it.
when is a felony sentencing? Let's see.
Uh,
Moses is the last name, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Walter Moses, you're on.
Except for 429. Why don't we set it for the day after? Let's see what happens, if anything.
Yes, sir.
Let's
Sorry.
set it for the felonies for 429.
That's 430.
So 430. Let's see. And
Yeah, and I can talk to the felony prosecutor just to see like, is this an issue? Felony two, my son, I just have so many things, so I can talk to the felony.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, chief.
Done.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thanks. You have something on today's docket?
No, Your Honor.
Is that what this is? PSR?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
One, Your Honor, but
So it's 255-7900.
So 255.
7900.
79.
On Cheryl.
7,900, Cheryl. It's the last name.
Yeah.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Am I bringing him up?
Oh, so this is, I guess,
He's not here.
He's not here. He's from out of state. There's not a date. And so I was wanting to answer the open warrant and try to see if we can set a bond.
We usually do that with them here so we can get bond conditions done. Where do they live?
He's in Maryland, Baltimore area.
Can he get here so we can do it? I don't mind giving him a PR bond,
Yeah.
but we need him here.
So he said he could be here by next week. I think spring break is next week for the family.
Tell him
The
to be careful, he
16th.
gets on a plane.
Well, that's the problem. So I didn't want him to get on a plane or drive and there's.
Well, driving, I mean, I don't think that
Either
there's,
way, we couldn't clear it because he would need to fingerprint and I would need him here to sign the bond and to be sent for fingerprinting. Because even if a bond is set, the warrant can't be cleared until they go to JPC and receive that information. So,
I don't know, like, if I were to set a bond, I don't know, would he be able to make it in Maryland?
oh, like a surety bond?
Yeah.
Right.
Or if I remember pay the court.
I know for
something.
surety bonds, they do have to fingerprint as well.
Yes.
So I'm
but-
not sure how that works.
Are you okay with setting a bond on this?
My only concern, I didn't realize it, but my only concern is obviously bond conditions, right? Like, I don't care about the amount, it's because it's family bonds case, so we're gonna contact.
Well, so what, you know, if we set a bond and he makes it, he's got 7 days to be here. If he doesn't come, we issue another warrant and I'll never do it again.
We just came from court one. There's apparently two cases.
Oh.
One was going to be dismissed. We
Wait a
thought it was-
second. No, 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 no.
And now we're here.
But
It's coming to us, regardless, it would have been, it's the lower case number. We have the lower case number, so it come to us.
what's weird?
That said to be the other day that that the magistrate found no PC on, they didn't sign the warrant.
Oh, that's weird. Did you hear that?
And we had a case too.
So let's get it here, Vic. Let's get it here so we can do everything all at once. You want to do that?
Yeah, the court one has to be the one to transfer it, and they have to sign it.
Will you go?
I just came from, but the prosecutor's office said they're going to end up dismissing the case. It hasn't happened yet, but there was no reason for the judge to issue a bond or anything. She said I still had to come here, so I just came.
Did they say when they're going to dismiss it or no?
No, but I mean, at this point, it can't.
The problem is, if I set you a bond now and they don't dismiss it, you'll never be able to post bond because there's always going to be that warrant out.
I mean, I can run up, go and check with she put on the record.
Oh, great. Is it your case?
It's not, it needs to transfer over because it was in court one, that's in court five.
He's saying that they're going to dismiss it.
The assault family violence.
I think the magistrate found no PC on it. And the magistrate refused to sign the warrant too.
It's the other one, Judge, that they found, they didn't find, it was the 255787.
They found no PC or they found
They
PC?
they didn't sign the warrant. The one
On the
in court
terroristic
one,
threat.
I don't know if he signed out. But. the
Okay,
one-
so I guess the magistrate found no PC on the terroristic threat and found
We don't have a case at all, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I was going to ask for a PC hearing anyway, but at this point, because there's an
Let
open
me do
warrant.
this plea real quick and
Yeah,
then.
I'll
Be on your
hang out.
case.
Thank you.
It was, the magistrate found no PC on the terroristic threat, our case.
Oh, okay.
So let me just do this plea and we'll do PC.
Yeah.
Coming up. How's jail?
Wasn't fun.
I'll be back.
You don't want help?
I would like to receive help.
We can help you find a place to stay. We can get you food, cell phones, all kinds of stuff. All you have to do is ask and we can provide it to you. The problem is that if you're homeless and you continue to rack up these convictions, you're just making it worse for yourself. Every time you plead guilty, you end up with a conviction. And when you rack up certain types of convictions, it only hurts you so much worse, you know? They've offered you time served. If you want to do this today, we can do it today. We also have other services available as well if you want that as well. You're charged with 2 counts of criminal trespass. The agreement that they have worked out, or that you guys have worked out, is they're going to dismiss one. You will end up pleading on the second one. If you do this, you're going to end up with a conviction on your record. From now on, you're facing a minimum of 30 days in jail. You understand? Is this what you want to do? You're giving up the right to a trial, right to compel witnesses to testify on your behalf, confront and cross-examine your accusers. If you're not a citizen, there are possible immigration consequences. You can be deported, excluded from the country, denied naturalization. You give up the right to appeal. So once you accept this, there's no turning back. Who do you have in your life? Do you have anyone?
Right now.
Mom, dad, anyone?
I have my mom, but I haven't contacted her.
Why not?
I haven't had the
Where does she live?
town.
So you would prefer to live on the street than contact mom?
I really get in contact with her, but it's just been a minute.
She's what?
It's been a long time. I would want to get in contact with her though.
Where are you living now, on the street? So why not call mom? Isn't it better to live at home with mom than to live on the street?
Without realizing.
But Cassidy, 30 days from today, if you have a change of heart, if you would rather do something else like a probation, come back and we can talk. Because I have jurisdiction within 30 days of after you do this. If you have a change of heart, if you want probation, if you want help, services, we can do that for you. You know, it just scares me that you're doing this. You're going to end up right back on the street, end up back in 2 weeks with another charge, you know? How do you plead to this offense, sir? Guilty or not guilty? Guilty.
Still give her resources.
I'm going to have you talk to Shatoria. We have resources that we can give you. Whatever you need, all you got to do is ask and we'll try to help you with whatever you need. All right? Like I said, if you have a change of heart, you want to do something within 30 days, let me know. We can do something, try to do something different. All right? How do you plead to the offense? Guilty or not guilty? Mr. Cassidy.
That's you. How do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty. What is that? How do I plead?
Guilty or not guilty?
Are you guilty of criminal trespass? All right. I'm going to find you guilty. I'll send it to the 90 days. I'll give you credit for 36. I'll have you talk to Shatori now so we can try to help you out. All right? All right. Good luck, Mr. Cassidy. Your other case will be dismissed.
Oh, I have.
Mr.
Rodriguez.
I don't know if you have another Rodriguez. I think we got set for trial today. We have some CPS records that we just got, so I just put in the
Yeah, I'll sign it.
motion and everything. So once I get that, I wanted to approach to get that. I have the records if you want them, because I know that the motion is, you know.
Oh, is this something from in camera?
So it is, I'm happy to give you those records if you would want them.
You want them, right?
Yes, Judge.
Okay. You have a problem with me releasing? I usually,
I guess these are the steps that I just have to.
of course, but I am a firm believer that it should be an open door. You know, you should be able to get access. Well, if it's relevant.
So I was asking if you wanted the
Yeah.
records, I
don't want it. I'm going to give it to you.
Yes, Judge. Thank you.
Yeah, so whenever it gets signed, I can.
I'll sign it right now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Where's Judge?
Jared, how are you?
I was hoping they wouldn't come up here so I could, no, I'm kidding. Approaching on the Joe Demas case, Judge, DEMAS, and it's on the jail docket.
Okay.
And I visited with the chief about it. He's got some felony cases that are pending for which the offer is pretty exorbitant amount of time.
What do they offer?
Well, they're at 15. And so, yes. And the problem is, I think they're in a position where he's served all the time he could ever get on our case, but they are not yet willing to or able to dismiss it because of the nature that this has been.
One more time?
Well, probably would help. Because I think he really needs to figure out how to resolve that case. So yes, I would defer to the court on that, but if you're willing to give more time, then I think it'd be appropriate. I'll give the day after his next felon court. Okay.
You got it.
Thank you, Judge. Thanks, Judge.
I don't see the CPS stuff. Guys. Hey, do you see the CPS stuff in there? Yeah, there's something for me to sign for CPS records to be released. Yeah. Sebastian, did you file something on this for me to sign? Because I don't see anything.
Maybe so.
I'm waiting on. Oh, okay.
Right, let me add this was, this was one quick.
Just take your time. There's no rush.
7900. It is discovered. Yeah.
Okay, I think I followed on the phone.
Ah, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So do you have the cost numbers on Cheryl?
Yes, I'm pulling it up now.
I mean, theoretically speaking, if a magistrate found no PC on our case here, there's nothing I can do anyways. Right? Because we've lost jurisdiction. So there's nothing that I can do with it. They either have to dismiss it or have to go re-indict it at some point. So what do you want to do with the terroristic threat?
I mean, just for candid purposes, this is the first time that I'm looking at
That you even see it. Okay, so
and everything, so I'm just not in a position where I'm gonna be able to say, yes, we're gonna, dismiss it or not.
what we normally do in that instance is we give the state a little bit of time to do whatever they want to do to determine whether they want to dismiss it or go indict it. We usually put it for the last. Vic,
Yes, Judge.
the no PC cases that they haven't dismissed, do we put it on the last day of,
The last Monday of the month, so April 28th.
that's what we normally put it on for you guys to make whatever decision that you want to do. The terrorist threat's out of my hand. Nothing I can do on it. So if you want me to do something on the assault, we got to get it down here. And then I can set you a bond.
They just called.
Okay.
The assault's been dismissed.
So I just want to make sure there's not an open warrant. That's the only.
So I guess just the warrants are signed.
But the problem, he never signed the 2B, right? So how can there be an open warrant if he didn't sign the 2B?
It's like it's in warrant status, but they didn't.
It'll show warrant status, but a judge, me, the magistrate never signed the actual warrant for it to issue. It shows warrant status, but.
Okay, so I think the open warrant was court warrant. Realistically.
No, because they just dismissed it.
Right, so now that will go away.
That's going to.
Potentially.
But our case here in court 5, it's been no PC by the magistrate. So the problem is that wherever he goes, people are going to see open warrant and they're not going to know what transpired here. So they're going to assume it's in warrant status. So they're going to.
That's my concern for him.
I understand. So ball's in your court. My name's Bennett and I ain't in it.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't do it.
I mean,
So
I can hang out today.
Take your time, take a look, what I would do, just, I guess, get his information, contact him in a couple days, see what you guys want to do, take your time, talk to whoever you need to talk to, and then make a decision.
So I'll look at my chief today, but see what's up.
And then you guys, I mean, there's for me,
Yeah,
there's
at
nothing
this-
to do, because
Well, thank you, Judge.
our house is out, and then the other one's been dismissed. I would go get a copy of that dismissal.
Right, no, this is all helpful either way. I'm glad I came down.
I would, at the minimum, go get yourself a copy of the dismissal from court 1, so you have that for your record, so you can give it to your client, and then let them know what's.
Judge, they're seeing that since, even though that they didn't sign the warrant, to see what needs to be heard by the judge and then.
She found, she found the proceedings.
They do things a little bit different, so like, just before they.
Did they find it? She had. Hold on, guys, hold on. Okay, so this is what happened. The cops go to get the warrant signed on the terroristic threat, and the magistrate refused to sign it. So what she's saying that we need to hear PC right now.
Let's have a hearing then. That's probably the easiest.
Shh. Okay, so, are you ready? Okay, go for it.
Officers were dispatched to a residence in Harris County, Texas. When witness stated that the defendant called her the day prior and stated, quote, "I know where you live. I'm going to come kill you. I'm going to kill your dog. I have a wrapper on your car." When witness told officers that the defendant had given her the vehicle and that she was concerned about the existence of a tracking device. Defendant is not a resident of the state, but was in town for an unrelated reason. The defendant then sent the complaining witness a photo of her apartment door after making the threat. Observed on ring video, the defendant hitting the door in an aggressive manner, stays CW, so she was in fear of her life.
So he says, go through it again.
All right, so complainant witness stated that the defendant called her the day prior and stated, I know you live, I'm going to come kill you, I'm going to kill your dog, I had a track on your car. Complainant witness told officers that the defendant had given the vehicle, not she was concerned about that, just tracking device. Defendant was in town for an unrelated reason, but the defendant then sent complainant a photo of her apartment door after making the threat. And the officer observed on ring video the defendant hitting the door in an aggressive manner, and the complainant stated she
So
was.
why would they find no PC? I mean, it's.
There's a few things left in there. I think first, the complainant stated she did not wish to pursue any criminal charges, perhaps.
Yeah, but that doesn't
I mean,
factor into whether there's probable.
The other issue, I think, is this allegedly happened on the day before, and at some point later the next day, the complaining witness, I don't think 911 was called, the complaining witness did their own investigation somehow. That's what I can tell from the way the complaint is written. So I don't think 911 was ever called. I don't think the threats are imminent as would be required under the terroristic threats.
He says, I'm going to come kill you. I mean, there's imminency with that. I'm going to go do that, right?
Certainly that is a consideration. I don't think that's imminent because there's not, I'm coming now, I'm doing this. Like, I think there has to be a finite time.
I'm going implies I'm coming.
And I think for the purpose of PC, right now we have a complainant stating, even if, she didn't want to press charges or anything, a complainant stating that she was in fear of imminent, she was in imminent fear. We have a statement, we have a video of a picture of her front door being sent, and then a video of the defendant's,
I
I don't know that we have that, but I understand if those threats were allegedly made, I think it was the day before.
Day before what?
The day before, based on the complaint, I'm just strictly going off the complaint. It was the day before, and then the next day in the evening, this complaint was filed. So that's what, there's at least a period of time that no longer has the imminency is my point.
No, they may have filed it later, but the act itself isn't terroristic threat when it happens. Of course, it takes time to file something. They're going to file it later, right? But the fact remains is that on this day, at this time, he says, hey, I'm going to fucking kill you, right? And then proceeds to provide more evidence, adding credence to the fact that he's going to do it. I don't know about the assault, but I mean, I think that there is sufficient to go forward just for the terroristic threat. If you want, I can set you a bond now. That way they can make it. But let him know that once I set a bond, if he makes it, he needs to be here within 7 days.
Sure.
And then after that, you guys go do about your business, right? Now, I think the fact that she may not want to go forward or whatnot, that will play into the case itself. But remember, probable cause is a very low burden.
No, I understand completely, Jan. I just think in terms of probable cause, and I understand that what the complaint has said, it's coming from a third party. I know hearsay is allowed and all of that later on, but for purposes of today, at least if we can get the bond, then, because I came with the impression that this was already an open case anyway.
And I thought so too, but a lot of times what happens is the magistrates don't get all the information because it comes in piecemeal. And so they may not have had all the information at the time when the 2B was issued, and they kind of supplement it after the fact. So what do you think about a bond? Amount wise?
2,000.
Well, can we just pay the court? I was thinking a couple $100 to pay to the court so that he doesn't have to pay a bondsman.
You're going to pay?
I'm not going to pay. A family
I was
member.
going to say, be very careful.
I'm not paying anything.
Be very careful.
Family will pay on his behalf, but I would want him to pay the court so that the money can be returned rather than a bonding company.
They'll have to go to the sheriff's office. They don't come here to ask.
No, either way, but I wanted to be able the opportunity to pay a couple $100 to the court so that money could be returned.
You're saying how much?
Like $300 to $500 is what I was thinking.
Sure, 500.
400 it is. We'll split the puppy for you.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to find PC on the terroristic threat.
Put the to be warning.
Okay, bond will be set at $400. Did they in fact dismiss the other one though?
Yes, Martha said
Okay.
she has to.
Can we print out a copy of it?
Pam?
Yeah, I gotta reset that one. Yeah.
If he can get here, I'll give him a PR bond. So
I think he said next week would be,
just, he runs a risk, right?
Right.
Because there'll be an open warrant for his arrest, so he runs a risk. The later he takes to do it, then, but, okay, we're done.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks.
8155.
Tell me about it.
For the DVR?
No,
Oh, sorry, her drug test was presumptively negative, Judge.
ever test positive again, I'm going to keep you.
Judge, it was a scram temper.
If you ever tamper with the device again, I'm going to keep you. I'm doing everything in my power not to revoke your bond. Do you understand? I don't care what it is. If there's a problem with your device, you need to go have it switched out, go get it looked at, but I will not entertain any more excuses from you. No tolerance. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Did she address my, curfew? My lawyer was supposed to ask you about my curfew because I got a job and I started today, and the job is from 5 p.m. to 6 a.m. at Igloo. And I have the letter saying that I've been accepted for the job.
Does she have something open elsewhere as well?
She had a deed to provide open out of Austin County, Your Honor.
Still open?
It's not still open. I'm not sure if she pled, but, or what happened, but looks like she's on probation now. For that one, Austin County.
You're on probation for DWI. You've not picked up another DWI. I don't want you driving in the middle of the night.
I'm not driving. I'm not driving.
That was just on March 26th, I think, Your Honor, is when she
Right, I
pled
don't-
for when that case was resolved. The year probation.
I resolved that case. And I,
Still have an open DWI and you picked up another DWI.
I didn't. I haven't done anything since before.
Don't talk. All I know is that you have a probation for DWI, you have an open DWI. The last thing I want is another death on my streets. And I'm going to do everything in my, I tell Pete, everybody tells me what I want to hear here.
I'm not.
And then when they get out there,
Before I took the job, I spoke with my lawyer. I
keys.
have someone that works there and they shuttle and I can get a ride. But right now, like, I'm having a problem with getting my lights were turned off. The phone was turned off. I'm worried about monitoring. So I've been working very hard to find a job. This is the only job that I found and I need to work to survive, to pay my bills. I have to work. And with the background that I have, it's been hard for me to find a job regular 8 to 5. This is the only thing that was available. And then I made sure that there was a ride or a shuttle. They work in shifts. So 5, 6 people in my neighborhood work there. So I've secured a ride to and from work.
proof of employment that you actually have a job working
I
there.
have it. My lawyer have it and I have the
Have
email
you
right
get
here.
with your lawyer. I want to see actual proof that you're working there. And then we'll put a GPS monitor on you.
I have a monitor. I have GPS monitor already.
Exact address so that we know that you're going to and from work. If you deviate in the slightest, and I don't care what it is, that'll be your 3rd bond violation, and I'm going to lock you up. I will deem you a public danger and make your bond sky high. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. Chief Marie, I'll have you get with your lawyer and then they can get with pretrial.
And I start today. It starts today at 5 p.m., which is why she had me come today.
Okay. I'll have you get with Ms. Freedy. She can get with pretrial. You guys can work out the details.
All right, thanks.
Judge, would you like me to email that proof of employment to you or to pretrial?
No, to, hey, it's 12 already?
So,
I wanted to approach on Mr. Wiggins,
Yeah. Sure.
So, and the reason I wanted to approach is I was in the process of getting the calls and everything, and I was informed that they were able to just block the number, in the jail. So, and I wanted to just kind of inform.
But he uses other people's SPIN numbers to make the calls. So even if you
Yeah, and so.
allegedly,
Right. So essentially, the reason that I wanted to approach was first of all to let you know that I still haven't gotten the calls. I'm not sure what the ETA on that is.
we set it for Monday, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I just wanted to let you know, I mean, from the state's perspective, when I talked to Jason, when I talked to, my superiors, when our act was to block the number. And I wanted to, kind of let you know that has happened. Thankfully, in the last however many days, there's been no calls to that number at all from the jail. So I wanted to make you aware of that as well.
Can they block the whole phone number so that no one with any SPIN number can access it?
I can certainly ask.
I think that would be the operative.
I think that would be optimal.
Because, what we have here, and the last time is the way that they were doing, what he was doing allegedly was he was using other people's SPIN numbers or SID numbers or whatever it is to be able to make the phone calls.
Right. And, when I was looking through the records, I didn't see any spin swapping because I ran obviously her number by itself. I didn't see any spin swapping recently. I understand that was an issue before. And we hadn't blocked, I guess I haven't blocked her active number since October or anything like that. So I did want to let you know, just because I do know that we had that hearing and everything, and I wanted to let you know that, from our perspective, our ask was kind of met, so I wanted to, just kind of be upfront.
So you don't want to go through with the hearing? Is that what you're saying?
I think that our concern and what the state's ask was initially was met. So now I understand obviously for you.
Before you do that, make sure that they can't use someone else's SPIN to make a phone call. Because if you can, then I think we're still in the same boat. Because that was the problem before. You're going to block him now, but if he can still, do it in another way. Yeah. And then just, I guess, let me know between now and then,
And my understanding is that since Monday, no one from the jail has called that number, not just Mr. Wiggins. So there hasn't been any spin swapping since Monday.
Right, but it was never supposed to be.
I understand, Judge. I just.
Yeah, and I more so just wanted to, be candid that was what our ask was initially. Okay. So,
Well, just let me know. I mean, ask that question. I think that's the most operative question at the time, and then we'll see what they say.
Okay. Thank you, Judge.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
The honor.
Yep.
Mr. Anthony Lopez.
Hold on a second. Let me just do this real quick. Just take a seat, please.
De Leon.
Do you speak English, De Leon?
Yes.
He speaks English.
Right.
All right. Good morning. You're charged with illegal dumping. You're facing up to 180 days in jail and or a $2,000 fine. You have worked out an agreement. They're offering you. Just keep it down. You've worked out an agreement. They're offering you 15 days in jail with credit for the 20 days that you've done. You need to understand, Mr. De Leon, that this charge will now go on your record. It will be there for the rest of your life. From now on, you're facing a minimum of 30 days in jail for any new cases that you pick up. You understand? You're giving up the right to a trial, right to compel witnesses to testify on your behalf, confront and cross-examine your accusers. If you're not a citizen, there are possible immigration consequences. You can be deported, excluded from the country, denied naturalization under federal law. You give up the right to appeal once you accept this agreement. There's no turning back. This is what you want to do. How do you plead to the offense? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
I'm going to find you guilty. I'll send you to the 15 days. I'll give you credit for the 20 that you've done. Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you, Judge.
Did you get your environmental, or is that what this was?
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor. Anthony Lopez.
Yes, Your Honor, they denied the PTI.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay. Mr. Lopez, you're charged with driving while intoxicated. You're facing up to a year in jail and or a $4,000 fine because of the high blow. You guys have worked out an agreement where they're offering you 3 days in jail with credit for the 1 day that you've done. True first?
Yes, sir.
The thing is that we all make mistakes. You're allowed to make mistakes once in a while, but when you continue to make mistakes where you endanger other people's lives, it just gets so much worse.
I understand, sir.
From now on, you need to understand you're facing a minimum of 90 days in jail. You pick up another case. Not only that, there's a $6,000 surcharge. You pick up another DWI.
Sir.
Do you understand? So if you want to get lit, find another way. Because of this DWI, you ever get pulled over in the future and you smell a little bit like alcohol or dope, you understand? You're giving up the right to a trial, right to compel witnesses to testify on your behalf, confront and cross-examine your accusers. If you're not a citizen, there are possible immigration consequences. You can be deported, excluded from the country, denied naturalization under federal law. You give up the right to appeal. Once you plead guilty, you can never take it off. This is what you want to do. How do you plead to the offense? Guilty or not guilty?
I plead guilty, sir.
Are you guilty? Okay. And this is not Target. You can't return it because you don't like it.
I understand, sir.
All right. I'm going to waive your $4,500 surcharge, but you come back with another DWI. Get ready. Do you understand?
Sir.
$40, take an Uber, wherever you want to go. All right, good luck to you, sir.
We also have another plea for Mr. Louis Lee, Mr. Honor.
Okay.
Just go over here.
Oh, I have to suspend your license. I'm going to suspend it for 90 days. Okay? You just don't drive until you get a license. Okay. On this one, is this a true first or no?
Yes.
Lemus,
It was denied PTI also.
again.
I read it.
Okay. Mr. Lemus, you're charged with driving while intoxicated. You're facing up to 6 months in jail and or a $2,000 fine. You have worked out an agreement where they're offering you 180 days in jail to be probated for 15 months. As part of this agreement, you will do a DWI education class, 2 victim impact panels, a TRAS to see what other conditions you may need. If you need them, you must fulfill them. No drugs, no alcohol, guardian in a lot, 30 hours of community service. Do you have any children? And a $100 one-time donation to MAD. Is this how you understand the agreement? True first? Say.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Like I told the other gentleman, you're allowed to make mistakes. But when you continue to make mistakes, whether you endanger other people's lives, it gets a lot worse. I will waive your otherwise supervisory fee, which you would owe $3,000, but you pick up another DWI. It's a $6,000 fine, and then a minimum of 30 days in jail from now on. Do you understand? Even the smell of alcohol, because you got this prior DWI now, they're going to put, you get pulled over, you're hosed. You understand? How do you plead to the DWI? Guilty or not guilty? I'm going to find you guilty. I will sentence you to this agreement. You're giving up the right to a trial, right to compel witnesses to testify on behalf, confront, cross-examine your accusers. If you're not a citizen, there are possible immigration consequences. You can be deported, excluded from the country, denied naturalization. I'm not going to suspend your license because you're doing the probation. But can you run his license? You're on probation for this DWI. You're not to drink alcohol. You're not to use drugs. If you have any issues, come back and talk to me. We can work through anything. But if you take off, you pick up a new case, you consume, it's the worst possible thing you can do. I will issue a warrant and we're going to have a hearing, and you violate, you're facing 180 days. Do you understand?
Yes, sir. Eligible, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. As long as you have liability insurance, you can continue to drive. How do you plead to the offense? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
I'm going to find you guilty. I'll follow the agreement. Good luck to you, sir. Thanks. Hey,
How you doing, sir?
how are you, Mr. Sweat?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Well, let's talk. You know, I think that you, if I remember correctly, you have a parole violation out of.
Louisiana judge.
No, Michigan, sir.
Yeah,
Or Michigan. Sorry, Michigan. I'm sorry. I conflated two cases.
That's right. He was a Michigander. That's what we were saying. That's right. You know, a lot of times in life, you really have to read the fine print. You got to read what you're signing. A lot of people just sign just because they want to be done with it. Yay, I'm getting on probation. Yay, I'm getting on parole. Let me just sign what I'm going to do. You know, one of the things that you sign in the jurisdiction where you signed, where you refused, or I'm sorry, you waived extradition by signing the document that you agreed to be on. So whether you agreed to get on parole, whether you agreed to be on probation, you refused extradition by signing the document in and of itself. And it says there, I will, waive extradition if I ever become a fugitive from justice. You are now a fugitive from justice, meaning that you are wanted out of the other state.
Yes, sir.
So you can't sit here and say, you know what, I want to try to get a bond so I can just go turn myself in. You have already you have what's called a pre-signed waiver. You have already signed.
Yes, that's why I was trying to get back.
We are going to get you back.
Yes,
The
sir.
problem is that sometimes, we give them up to 30 days for them to come get you from Michigan.
I was under the impression it was 14.
In the typical instance where I don't give someone a bond, yeah, but for pre-signed waiver cases, it's 30 days.
Judge, and if I may, that's my argument. When we did all this, we always talk about the practice of 14 days. And so when we originally talked, we reset it out 14 days and we were all basing it on the 14 days. Now, the extension that they're seeking is my understanding because he is detoxing. And at that point, my question is, I talked to him when we talked about the 14 days. We understood each other. He understood me. He seemed fine. I talked to him again today. He seems fine.
And he may be fine now, but when he probably first got here and when everybody was notified, it may have been a different story. He may have been like, just
No, I talked to him when we talked about the waiver, Judge.
Yeah, I'd been off my detox medication by the time I signed my waiver. I was no longer on even any detox medication.
And so my argument, Judge, I get it. And my argument is, hey, he's ready to go. We don't need extra time. Why are we holding him here extra days? Yeah, he signed the pre-signed waiver, but we talked about 14. If they're supposed to be here in 14, that's the practice. He's good to go.
That's not the practice for pre-signed waivers. It's not right. The 14 days, and understand the 14 days, hold on.
Yes, sir.
The 14 days
Yes, sir.
is us being nice because statutorily, it's 30 days. Even in the instance where if it were a 14-day thing where I'm going to give someone a bond or this or that, statutorily, it's 30 days. We do 14 days because we have so many damn people in jail that we try to get them out as quick as possible. So as a courtesy to you, it's for everybody else, not for pre-signed waiver cases. We, as a courtesy, do 14 days. But in reality, we have 30, or they have 30 to come get you. And then Harris County releases you at that time.
May I say one thing?
Sure.
It would have been 8 days ago, last Tuesday. They told me ATW. I went downstairs. They said Michigan is here to get you. I waited 4 hours and in the holding cell. Then they said, actually, they're not coming. I had to go all the way back to the booking process again. They took my money from my account, put it in a check. I cannot go to commissary, can't go to commissary. And the waiver that I did sign, I did read the fine print and it said they have 14 days. And if they do not, 10 business days, 14 calendar days. And if not, then they can seek an extension if necessary. My argument, I understand everything you said and I'm not questioning I know the law more than you, but I did read the fine print.
So hold on, let's find out. Mr. Kim,
Yes, Judge.
what's the good word? Tell me
So
about-
they're supposed to be giving an update this afternoon. Hold on, I don't want to misspeak. Yes, I got an email about an hour ago, I want to say, that they should give the final update yesterday, but it's one where obviously they have to medically clear him, liability alone in terms of, I'm not going to just, trust that he's good to go until a medical professional tells me that he's good to go for transport, because it's a liability on both, obviously, the sheriff's office side and Michigan side for the transport. We have
You want to
had
roll it till tomorrow to see what they say?
Well, I mean, that's fine, but it's just for an update, just because, I mean, once the email comes in saying that he's clear, I would obviously relay that over to Ricardo. So, I mean, we can roll over, that's fine, but just rolling it over isn't going to rush their decision because they already have it on the forefront because we've been emailing about it.
Do you
Because
have
it's-
any clue when they're gonna get here?
Well, so once he's clear, they can book it. So I believe they said once they clear him, they can get him in.
What do you mean, once they clear him? What does that mean? He's not cleared as of right now?
That's what I mean. Is like right now, medical has not cleared him from the Harris County side for Michigan to
I
come
haven't
get
been on
him.
detox medication since the fourth
I have
day.
no idea what that means.
The fourth, when I was withdrawn because I had to take Xanax. And when I came in, they gave me a 5-day detox. I haven't been on detox medication.
So let's do this. Let's roll it to tomorrow. Who
Okay.
do I need to check in with to see if he clears from medical?
Well, I mean, it's a sheriff's office via Harris Health, but we're already in communication with them. That's what I'm saying. It's like no one's sleeping on this. We've been actively. There's like 4 emails this morning alone. No one is. They're just making sure he's cleared medically. And so there's no magic. It's going to be in 4 hours. It's when medical clears him. And it's not something that I can force, obviously, because it's determinative of his condition. Not just the fact that he's off medication. It's the equivalent of going into an ER. They have to observe. They have to make sure he's stable and he's safe for transport. I don't know what that means. And obviously, the sheriff's office makes that determination based on safety. So safety, both him and the officers coming to pick him up.
I guess let's do this. Set it for Friday. And I'll reach out to the sheriff's office to see what the heck is going on so they can go interview him to get him cleared as soon as possible.
Okay, I will have this
I
reset
will email now, figure out sweat, right?
Off on me, actually, I did too sweat. My understanding when I looked into it, it's the prison that wants you.
Charles Egler reception.
Whatever it was,
Center.
I think I mentioned it to you, like, who is
You said
this?
the Lansing tether unit, but,
That thing, that's who's asking for you.
but am I going to the
Mr.
county
Kent,
jail?
Day, I'm gonna CC you on this, okay?
Yes, Judge.
Give me a second. Hey, Ricardo, what's your email address?
Judge, it's R, last name Laredo.
832? Okay, I'm CCing you on this as well.
And Judge, my only argument is look at the man. He looks in better health than
No,
I am.
that's why I'm emailing
Yeah.
down.
That's all. Thank you, Judge. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I actually have a court date set for the 16th, which would have been the day after my 14th day.
Okay. Well, Judge is doing he's going
Yeah.
above and beyond. He's
I
trying to
appreciate
figure
it.
it out for us as well. So
Thank you.
let's allow an opportunity to do so. So you can hear everybody's trying to figure this out. I mean, everybody sees you.
Yeah.
Judge sees you. I see you.
Yet he has been held in custody since when?
27th. 27th of last month.
Is that right?
It sounds about right. I saw him.
I don't want to take your word.
Dave, do you have that by chance?
It shows that he was filed on April 1st. Oh, wait, no, sorry. It's the wrong case.
3/31.
Oh, sorry. It's 3/31. Yeah.
3:30. I was held in Pasadena jail till the 20, from the
I'm
27th.
not counting Pasadena.
Okay.
The point we're doing now is you look good. We're trying to make that happen as soon as possible. You're just in the.
But once they clear me, we'll start over. And I feel like we're how many days.
They lost how many days we lost. We're trying to figure it out.
Okay. So let's at least set you 2 days out to make sure, what my feeling is that medical is going to want to talk to you to make sure everything's fine so that you're fit for transport. Once that happens, they can get the fugitive prosecutor to let Michigan know, hey, come get him. And then hopefully they can do it within the allotted time. I've just set the email now. Let's set off for 2 days for Friday and we'll see. And hopefully that gets done.
Is the allotted time being 14 or?
I don't know yet.
Sure. We're trying to figure it out.
I don't know. I'm not gonna commit to anything at this point because I don't know why they didn't clear you when they last interviewed you. So there's a lot of other things that play to determine when the day actually is. But be that as it may, we're gonna try to get you out as quick as possible.
Yes, sir.
No one's sleeping on it and no one's waiting for just,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Thank
We're
you.
working for this.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay.
Thank you for.
Thanks for
Thank you, Judge. I'll reset to Friday.
He's on today's docket.
This is the gentleman, it's a theft of the projector from, okay.
Victoria told me I needed to approach about bond conditions, but if you're happy with them all,
Well, no, the thing is I want to, this case is super duper old, right?
yes. And the Judge, this was a 2B. And so that's part of the age. And then,
If it's a true 2B for
well-
like 180 days, then I don't have a problem. But if he's been on bond
Well-
and then he takes off for 150, then
so just my brief look at it, what looks like happened is it was a 2B. He got picked up, he paid an out-of-county bond. And his next court date was not clear to him. And
come on.
so, he did bond forfeit. And then he paid another out-of-county bond and he's here
Yeah,
today.
he's forfeited at least 2 different times. It's now 212 days on.
It looks like to me, he's only bond forfeited once.
He's made,
And again, any amount of bond forfeiting is bad, but
discovery complete on this case.
Hold on, Your Honor. Verify that.
If you ever take off on me again, Mr. Williams, you know what's going to happen to the bond. And if you don't have anyone in this world that's willing to pony up 10,000, perhaps 5 to 10,000, you will be stuck like Chuck in there until this thing is over. Do you understand me? The only thing in this world I'm asking you to do is keep my county safe and show up. You pick up another case, you are unsafe to my county. It's really not going to go well for you. Do you understand me?
Do believe this, Your Honor, there's,
I'd like you to do a writ first as well to see whether they got the projector back or not.
yes, Your Honor.
And then,
Judge, if we can just have a regular reset,
your regular reset.
that'll give me time to look at
You
everything.
must be here at the next setting. So we're going to decide what we're going to do with this case. But I'm going to tell you now, if they didn't get it back, it will be part of anything. That
Understood.
restitution is, all right, Mr. Williams, don't have any contact with these people. Don't have any weapons. Don't pick up any new cases. So I guess Felicia, I'll have you do it as just because it'll be faster so we can get them out of here. Just no contact with the complaining witness, no going back to the pawn shop, no new cases, no drugs, no alcohol. Okay, all right, dude. Good luck. See you in 30.
Excuse, okay.
Mr. Slider,
How are you, Judge? Good to see you as always.
great to see you, man. Been too long.
So we are finally going to see Mrs. Uceda. We're going to do a 6-month deferred.
Okay.
Basically, she's almost been on deferred for a year and a half anyway, doing this. But we're
Why,
gonna-
what's, I don't remember what this case, is this
This
the
was a-
one?
Yeah, this was a CompuVal, brought the fake gun to school.
I remember.
Yeah.
How's Coffee about? She's totally fine, man. Come
She
on.
had Monopoly. You're-
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Never played Monopoly before. Did you play Monopoly? God, she still didn't play Monopoly. Come on.
she judged.
You would know, man.
I-
Get your sister.
Because we're doing a 6-month and I think the TRAS said thinking for a change. I think we should change that to effective decision-making and anger management because there's no way she's doing 18.
And that's all I really want to see is that young adult case. Are we good with the 6 months on young adult case?
Yeah.
That's really all I care.
And we're just going to change the thinking for a change to effective decision-making and anger management.
Is which effective decision-making class, though?
The effective decision making is going at 8 hours, the thinking for a change is a 16-week one.
Right, that's a big difference, you know,
She's not going anywhere for 16 weeks, Judge. I mean, when I tell you she's been in my office like 50 times, I mean, everything that we do has to be spoon fed. I see there would be a compliance
I
problem.
understand. Okay, it's fine. Okay. I'm for it.
As long as you have the golf casework on there.
Are you ready?
We're doing the paperwork now. I just want to clear that up. Give me about 5 minutes and we'll do that. Your call her.
Judge, are we doing continued supervision on?
Finish walking.
Pop tested Monday.
In my phone.
Hey, how are you?
That's it, you're free to.
Pop test Monday.
How are you?
Mirrors.
Just drug tested?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. If you have been convicted of a felony and the other state, but I mean, felony and the other state. And then you're requesting the judge to decide to place you on community supervision. You're requesting the judge to place you on community supervision. Oh.
She's asking you.
Yes or no? Yes. Okay. You can sign. Sorry, I'm nervous.
There's my name.
Just sign. Signature. Okay, and then I'm going to.
I did one month. I went my mom TikTok.
Yeah, you did go viral. We went viral.
Yeah.
Okay. You're right though on the blue line.
They wanted to do an interview, but I said no. I said no.
Right.
You're right though. Blue light person hold. That's perfect.
Oh, thank you.
All right, thank you. You step the chair card.
Come on up, Miss Hussein. So you were charged with threatening exhibition or use of a firearm with a school bus. You're facing up to a year in jail and or a $4,000 fine. You have worked out an agreement that it's a 6-month deferred. Miss Uceda, this is the type of probation that if you complete successfully, you do not end up with a conviction on your record. You understand?
Yeah, I understand.
You can't tell people it was dismissed. It doesn't get dismissed. You do a probation. If you complete it, there's no conviction on your record.
Oh,
There's a big difference. Do you understand?
yeah, I understand.
Okay. It is extremely important that you complete this successfully, because if you don't, this is a potential crime of violence that will always be used against you in the future. If you ever try to apply for a job, if you ever try to go do something in this life, you will always have to explain this. If it's a conviction, meaning if it goes on your record, that is a very bad thing.
Yeah, I
You
understand.
need to complete this probation.
Mhm.
You understand?
Yeah, I understand that.
I'm going to waive all your fees. It's never about the money. It's about you showing up on time, not using alcohol, not using drugs, and doing illegal drugs, and doing the classes you're supposed to do.
Mhm.
The recommendation here was for you to do a Thinking for a Change, which is a 16-week class that you go once a week. Mr. Slider has asked for me to give you a different class, which is a effective decision-making class, which is an 8-hour class. I will do it. The other thing she's supposed to do is what else?
It's anger management. He's still in anger management. I finished that one already. If it's okay, we can use that certificate.
Did she do it?
She did do it.
Yeah, I finished it.
She's done quite a bit since she's been on bond, Judge.
Okay, I will give you credit for anything that you've done.
Mhm.
The only thing that we're asking you to do, stay out of trouble. Don't be in possession of weapons. And I'll make you a deal. If you do really well, I'll take you off in half the time. So if you get everything done, you're nice to everybody, especially the probation officers, because I'm telling you, these people have a really hard job because they deal with a lot of people who aren't nice. And if you aren't nice to the probation officers, they're not going to treat you well and you're going to be right back over them.
Mhm. I understand.
You're giving up a lot of rights by entering into this agreement. You give up the right to a trial, right to compel witnesses to test on your behalf, confront, cross-examine your accusers. If you're not a citizen, there are possible immigration consequences. You can be deported. Right. I still have to advise you that if you're not, you can be deported, excluded from the country, denied naturalization.
Oh, I was.
He's just advising you,
Oh,
just in
okay.
case if you weren't, he's just making sure.
You need to
that
understand that you
understand.
also give up the right to appeal.
Oh.
So what that means is that once you enter into, this is a contract that you and I are entering into. If you complete it successfully, we're all happy. If you violate it though, I will issue a warrant for your arrest. I'm going to put you in jail, bring you back out, and you're facing a whole year if you violate this. You understand?
Yes, I understand.
Don't pick up any new cases. Do your stuff on time. If there's ever any issues, if you ever have any problems, come back, talk to us, and we can work through anything.
Okay, I understand.
Any questions?
No.
How do you plead to the offense? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty. Sorry, I'm very nervous.
No need to be. You know, as long as you do everything well, there's no need to be nervous. I'm not going to find you guilty. I'm going to wait. I will withhold that for 6 months. Wait for you to do what you need to do.
What I did was a mistake, I know.
Just the idea is that you learn. That's why we have this, so that you learn, so you don't make the mistake again and end up with something worse. Everybody back there in jail, they never learn. They never grew up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Grow up. What are you doing with yourself now? Did you graduate from high school?
last year I graduated.
So what's the plan for the rest of your life?
Next year I might go to college
Why next year? Why are you waiting?
because they were helping me to get into college, but
Who's they?
like the teacher from high school,
Okay, so what are you doing with yourself now? Nothing.
helping my parents. I know it's nothing, I know.
No, that's not good. You're doing nothing. And the thing is that all you're doing is you're getting older. And if you're not doing anything now, 1 year is going to pass by, 2 years is going to pass by. That's unacceptable.
I might get a
No.
job.
No, you need to get a job. And I'm now making that a condition of as well. You either have to get a job or be in school full time. I'm not going to let you be a bum and do nothing while you're on probation. If you don't get a job, it's not going to go well for you. You need to be productive, because when you have too much time on your hands, you get self-destructive. Bad things happen. You need something to do in this life. Do you understand?
Understand.
Okay, so I want to know within 3 weeks that she's done something. I'm giving you 3 weeks. If you don't have a bunch of applications in to try to get a job, that's not going to go well. I want you to start looking.
I applied, but they want like everything. They want social security.
How else are they going to pay you?
They want it. I don't have such, I do have, but
You do? If you were born here, you do. You just got to
they
go
want
get a copy
ID,
of
but I
it.
haven't got my ID.
She got to go get her ID.
I have to go get my ID.
Man, how are you going to live this life without even an ID? What she say to? No. I'm gonna keep you here. We're gonna work with you to make sure that stuff happens with you. First, I want you to get your ID. You got 2 weeks. After that, we're gonna work on getting your social security card. You got another 2 weeks to get your social security card. After that, we're gonna start working on getting you a job.
Social security.
You got the card?
My mom has it.
Okay, so I want you to go get an ID. You got 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Got it?
Yes, I got it.
Okay. Good
Thank you,
luck.
Judge.
Thank you so much. Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. So ixnay on the job day, yeah, let's make sure she gets her ID first, and then we'll come back and start working on it.
Today's docket ran for hours and covered more ground than most people will ever see inside a single courthouse in a single morning. A woman made a finger gun gesture at two men fixing a pothole in her parking lot and said, "I'm going to shoot you." The judge found probable cause, ordered no contact, and told her, "People make false allegations all the time. There are two sides to every story. That is what your lawyer is for." A man fired a gun inside his own apartment while drunk and high, soaking wet from a bucket of water he had poured on himself, telling officers he was paranoid. His mother took the gun from him and called 911. The judge sent him for a drug test on the spot and said, I do not want to have to put you in jail. A man refused to lower his car windows during a traffic stop, refused to get out, clenched his fists when officers reached in, and told them he did not have to comply. The judge found probable cause and gave him the minimum condition: follow the law, have a valid license, have insurance. That is all. A man hid a $2,000 projector inside a baby car seat carrier while a toddler and infant were used as cover, and his partner completed a transaction at the counter. He had already missed court 3 times. The judge told him, "If you take off on me again, your bond hits the sky." A young man kept testing positive for marijuana every time he came back, then blamed every restroom in his high school. The judge said, "I don't believe it. 2 weeks. Come back clean. Your word means nothing right now." A 20-year-old showed up disheveled, chewing gum in shorts with no job and no plan. The judge spent 30 minutes pulling up Target, Starbucks, and Amazon on his own phone, printing out job listings and telling him, "Perception is reality. If you walk into an interview looking like this, kiss it goodbye, shower, shave, set lofty goals, make me proud." A man with 2 scram tamper events, one 10 hours long, starting at 4:30 in the morning with alcohol detected, told the judge his boots and his neuropathy cream were the cause. The judge sent him for a drug and alcohol test and said, "I know what a tamper looks like." A man pleaded guilty to his second DWI while the judge described what had happened the day before. A man in his 30s, 2 prior convictions, killed a police officer, now has life. The judge waived every dollar owed, suspended the license, made him sign an affidavit, and said, "One button on your phone, $40, anywhere you want to go, just do not get in the car." And a young woman who brought a fake gun to school and spent the last year and a half working through the system, classes, check-ins, compliance, stood before the judge today and was told, 6 months deferred. No conviction on your record if you finish it. We changed the class to something you can actually complete. Go do it. This courthouse does not give up easily. It adjusts the class. It waives the money. It prints out job listings from the bench. It tells you what happened yesterday to the man who did not listen, and then it opens the door. We will see you in the next one.